Well, hey there, freaks. It's your boy Marty Bent here to introduce this week's episode of Tales from the Crypt. I had the immense pleasure of sitting down again with Justin Moon from the Mooniversity. He was in town and had a long layover, so I invited him over to my spot. We drank some whiskey, drank an incredible amount of whiskey, and caught up. Last time I talked to Justin, he was just starting Buidl Bootcamp, which has turned into Mooniversity. Since our last discussion, a lot has happened in Justin's life. He's been building a lot of cool shit. A couple projects he's working on, in particular, Junction, the BitBoy, in Mooniversity in particular. We talked about a lot in this one. This is a great app. It's always fun getting together with Justin. A truly kindred spirit in the Bitcoin world. I'm very happy that you freaks get to listen in on this conversation we had, because it was truly just two guys palling around, you know? That's what we're here to do. And if you're not palling around, you better be stacking sats, and you better be using the Cash App. This episode's brought to you by the Cash App. If you're not using the Cash App, what the hell are you doing? You download the Cash App, you use the code STACKINGSATS, that's STACKINGSATS, one word. You're going to get $5. $5 is going to go to Owls Lacrosse, a charity very near and dear to our hearts. And then you're going to get all the functionalities of the Cash App, and the list just keeps getting longer of what you can do with it. So you already know you can stack sats, you can buy Bitcoin, you can sell Bitcoin, you can send Bitcoin from your app to a personal wallet, from personal wallet to the app. On top of that, you have the Boost program where you get your debit card. You go anywhere Visa's accepted. You put on your partner Boost. You go to where that merchant is, say be Whole Foods. You save your 5% of Whole Foods. Hey, you need to go get a coffee. You put on your coffee Boost. You go save $1 there. Boost program's incredible. They're always switching merchants in and out, and then they started teasing it last week. It looks like you're going to be able to buy stocks in the Cash App soon, partial stocks at that. So they started rolling it out to a few users, it looks like, towards the end of last week. And so if you don't have the functionality yet, I believe it will be there soon. So use the code STACKINGSATS, go to your local app store and download the Cash App today. This episode is also brought to you by Casa. Freaks, how confident are you in your keys' security? How protected are your keys from disasters, physical attacks, and yourself? You got to protect your keys from yourself. You are your keys' biggest enemies. Our friends at Casa have drummed up one of the smartest and most secure ways to hodl your Bitcoin. There's no KYC, no altcoins, no percentage fees on your Bitcoin. There's no one standing between you and your keys. Engage with Casa and get the peace of mind for your stash with one of the world's most secure multi-sigs. Use the code TFTC to get up to $250 off your Casa membership, or hit their team up directly at membership@team.casa for a free demo. That's membership@team.casa. Email them, ask them what the hell they're doing, put them through your hardest OPSEC questions, and then ask them to go through their product. The product has many packages. All memberships come with a full set of hardware wallets for your multi-sig. You get the Node, Faraday bags, early access to all future Casa products, and for bigger hodlers, for more serious hodlers, the Diamond and Platinum memberships net you 24/7 VIP service, dedicated client advisor, and a dedicated client advisor, and custom onboarding and OPSEC plan. So go to keys.casa, check them out. If you guys do get a Casa membership, make sure you use the code TFTC. You're going to get up to $250 off. And I hope you guys enjoy this episode with Justin. Again, it's always fun getting together with Justin, sitting down. It's a long one, a long rip. We got pretty cosmic. So enjoy.
Tales from the Crypt.
What is up, freaks? It's your boy Marty Bent here on a rainy, scary October Wednesday night with a good friend. Happy to have him back in the studio. Justin Moon, welcome back.
Good to be here.
It's good to have you back, man.
I'm tempted to make that sound of yours, but it feels like a violation. I'll leave that to you.
You can do it. I encourage people to try. That was good. That was a good first attempt.
You have to get higher up in the falsetto than Amanda's normally comfortable getting.
Yeah, you have to be. Well, I would argue that the higher in the falsetto that you can get, the manlier you are. Right?
Yeah,
you can't be afraid of musical talent.
Exactly.
What did you think of this critique we were just watching here?
It was good. I mean, there are a lot of flaws that Bitcoin has, but there's and he hits a few of them.
Yeah, so let's describe what we're watching. We're watching the Real Vision Gold versus Bitcoin week right now, and we were talking about something that we will get into more heavily later in this conversation, multi-sig setups. But Justin was walking me through some multi-sig setups that he's been working with, and it brought me back to this video, which I watched earlier this morning on Real Vision, Gold and Bitcoin, the Monetary Systems, Navigational Beacons. And it was an interview with Simon Mikhailovich, who is the founder of the Bullion Reserve, and he's a huge gold proponent and not as big as a fan of Bitcoin. And he had some good critiques, but I think
so. This is the thing I often see with like I don't want to say good critics because I'm not sure if there is one, but like at least the better critics, like they'll say something true, right? So he says like, what would people use as a money? The thing that everybody knows about and is familiar with, or something that very few people know about that is more complex and fewer people, are familiar with it. And it's like, well, clearly they'd use the thing everyone knows. And then so he's like, therefore, gold is better than Bitcoin. And it's like, true statement, non sequitur, right? It's like, yeah, well, maybe it's better now. I mean, it is better now if you need to settle like a huge transaction volume, like it's probably easier to do it in gold, maybe, especially with certain counterparties, like a government or something. It's like they're going to be more comfortable working with gold, but that doesn't mean it's going to be true in the future. So like he's making a present argument about Bitcoin and trying to write it off for all future when the thing went from 0 to 10,000 in one goddamn decade.
Why doesn't anybody give Bitcoin a chance? Why can't they just give Bitcoin a chance?
I mean, it's the blessing. It's like there's a great quote by like Paul Graham where it's like, what is it? There's like the best startup ideas sound so crazy that the people who are most threatened by them don't realize it until it's too late, right? Like hotels thought Airbnb was a joke until it was a juggernaut. Same thing with taxi cabs and Uber, with mainframes and Microsoft. This sort of thing, it's like you have to be crazy enough you have to be so crazy that you are actually able to get a leeway. And Bitcoin is exactly that. Like 10 years later, people still think it's crazy, and that's cover.
Yeah, no, and it's fun to be one of the crazy ones, but you keep going down to keep checking off Simon's critiques. Another one was the again with multisig, the $5 wrench attack. Like he proclaimed that gold owners don't have to worry about physical harm because their gold.
Well, he started with banks, which is like a very true point. It's like that's one of the great things banks do is they don't
custody your money.
They custody your money. They don't give money. They don't. They can sort of be there and help out when someone's tortured. At least that's how the movies all portray it, right? Like the bank managers are always these good guys, right? Like the banking lobby's somewhere involved there in these critiques, but like that's people's perception at least. And it's like, yeah, it's probably true. It's better to have that than to just have like a bunch of diamonds like trailing you as you walk down the streets in Brooklyn, right? Like I'd rather have the banks than the bank receipts than the diamonds. But and he goes on to say, well, then gold is similar. You can have it stored away in another country. And he's like, but Bitcoin, you have to memorize it in your head. It's like, wait, no, you don't.
You can.
This is one of the things is like they'll say intelligent things, and then all of a sudden it's like this one thing that's like, this is like 101 level understanding. The whole point of Bitcoin is that it's easier to physically transport. It's like the analogy Satoshi gave is like, imagine a precious metal, right?
A gray metal, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that is like gold in every way, except for one thing. You can send it over the internet. Like that is the differentiator in his mind. And so to say it's easier to physically get gold into a foreign country than it is Bitcoin. It's like, what?
It's absurd on its face.
Yeah.
And then, well, I want to give Simon some leeway here. I mean, he's a gold bug. Gold is his wheelhouse, and what he focuses on is probably not as educated about Bitcoin multi-sig setups and the way in which you could set up your Bitcoin security so that you are less susceptible to it.
But see, this is what I wonder. When he says something like that you cannot, when he basically root claim, gold is easier to physically transport than Bitcoin. Like that was his claim right there. Is he uneducated? Does he believe that's false and lie? Or does he actually believe that? Because if he actually believes that, he's incredibly ill-informed. And that just speaks to, again, how crazy the Bitcoin idea is and how this crazy thing just sort of somehow shields it and allows the sort of the right people to understand it like in a series over decades. And this guy, this brilliant guy, I'm sure, still is, like kindergarten level.
I want to say kindergarten level.
If he doesn't know that Bitcoin is easier to transport physically than gold,
I think it's
this is like top 3 thing. Like scarcity and that are the 2 big things.
Yeah, what's the quote? Basically, it'll be hard to convince a man of something that hurts his paycheck.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's my point. Is like, I mean, if I were him, I would probably. I mean, it would be hard to see the value of Bitcoin when you're. I mean, it's like us and a shitcoin coming. It's like we're not. If we're honest with ourselves, we're not the best person to judge that. We're highly biased, right?
Are we?
I mean,
no, dude, they're all scams, bro.
I agree. So like that's not like, you know, in some crazy world where there is an invention that beats Bitcoin, I don't think it's going to happen. But like in that crazy world, like we would be pretty blind because we're like heavily biased in one way. And I think similarly, he's probably the same with gold. It's like, hey man, it's worked for millennia. It's going to keep working. Like it's a sensible claim.
It is, and actually. So I can say this now because by the time this is recorded and posted, the episode will have aired. But that's what Saif and I talked about on the Real Vision episode. And Saif even acknowledged that too. He's like, hey, the biggest competitor to Bitcoin right now is a successful gold standard. It's got the Lindy. It's got the history. If the gold standard or if the gold standard doesn't get its shit together, the people who run under a gold standard get their shit together. So if people were able to get their shit together and create a viable gold standard in today's day and age, Saif conceded that, that may kill Bitcoin in the long run. But I'm not putting words in Saif's mouth. This is what I believe. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
That's why we Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Which is, it is interesting when you, like, as a Bitcoiner, hearing somebody who wrote the Bitcoin standard be like, yeah, Bitcoin can be beaten by the gold standard. Like
the funny thing is, on a personal level, these gold people are the most similar to us of anyone in the world. They're basically us, but a generation older and a generation grayer. You know, like kind of the same demographics, kind of the same walks of life.
Why can't we be friends?
Exactly.
Why
it's
can't
like
we
should really be looking for them for like, you know, I think life support. Is like, what's the next 20 years of my life going to look like?
I'm actually hopeful that this is starting to happen. At least me personally, I can speak for myself again. I have been like a Peter Schiff, Goldbug hater, but then it's like, hey, you guys are actually fighting for sound money, hard money too, and I think that's admirable. And I do think over time we'll be able to convince you because I do believe that you're.
They're the only ones that care. They're the only ones that care of anybody, and so it's like every time Ron Paul ends up looking, going out on some Litecoin event or something. It's like, hey man, just give us. He doesn't get this part of it. This is a little detail. He gets so much of the rest of it, though.
Well then, shout out to people like Warren Davidson.
Exactly, right. Man, that guy,
fucking legend.
That guy ripped it.
Just putting it all out there, dude. Talking about Bitcoin, guns, everything, man.
Yeah.
To hear the candor of a politician like that.
In the first like 10 minutes, all of a sudden they're like, well, how'd you get into digital cash? And he's like, well, back in the day, I was a big fan of DigiCash. And I'm like, what? What? Elected official? DigiCash? And he keeps going. It's like he's talking about the destroyers when the destroyers come. Like Pierre sort of ironically asked him, like, well, what round would be money in a world where like we use barter? What ammo round? What gun round? And he took that and he ran with it like for like 2 minutes, actually seriously addressing that conversation. Like, if you're talking about the 442 and there's a 9, and it's like the one will pierce a man, the other one will obliterate the man.
Is that fifth column?
Huh?
Would you consider him fifth column?
I don't know what fifth column means.
Fifth column is actors within the government or a corporate setting. Not acting against. Oh yeah, well.
I mean, he's acting for us. Like, it's
acting for us and against the will of
he doesn't own
the
Bitcoin.
System.
He doesn't own Bitcoin. He clearly would if he weren't elected. So it is like, it seems like the guy's sort of taken a personal. He's taken a sacrifice probably because he's been interested in it for years, and he's trying to go and improve the regulatory environment for us. That's a little bit.
Huge shout out to Warren.
Exactly. But I don't know much about politics, so this is
I-
this is the extent of it. If it comes unnoted, I can converse on it. But basically, I hear Tulsi's around or something. I don't know. That's about all the names I know.
I haven't watched any of the Dem debates or any of the debates.
Yeah,
for
no,
that
that's.
matter.
Yeah, I was just thinking like last year. So we did the first podcast a year ago.
That's exactly what I was just gonna say. What the how's your year been? It's been
Yeah,
Justin and I were talking about it before we hit record. It was probably almost exactly a year since we last talked. You were before, or while we were talking, you were on your way to a Lightning Network conference here in New York, and now you're on your way to a Lightning conference in Europe.
Yeah.
So it's prescient that you're here now.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting. I was thinking back like what was Lightning like back then, and kind of what's it like now, and yeah, a lot's changed. I sort of
Not even Lightning in particular, dude. What the hell's been going on with Buidl Bootcamp? Like, you've been building dope hardware. You're working on this Junction thing. Like, what has your life been like?
We'll go into that. So last
I
year,
want to learn about Justin Moon, not about the Lightning Network, not about Bitcoin. How the hell have you been, bro?
Man, it's just tales. I'm gonna give you some tales. All right. So yeah, like a year ago, I decided to. So I was trying to figure out where my role would be in the Bitcoin ecosystem because it's like there wasn't like so I have sort of like a missionary zeal about how I do things. It's like I want to when I hear about something that's like really important like this, I just have to participate. I can't just like buy coins and sit on the sideline. So yeah, I was trying to figure out what would be interesting, and I was just learning the technical details of Bitcoin and found it kind of difficult. Like I'd just be oftentimes like reading code and guessing what it did. It's like I took Jimmy Song's course and it was great, and that's about all there was. And so yeah, I started this class called Buidl Bootcamp. At the time, I did not realize Buidl was an Ethereum thing, and after about 3 months, I really regretted the name choice. But it's like too late now.
No, you co-opted
so
it.
it
was a good co-opt.
A little bit, but that name sucks, man.
It's got to be really hard for SEO purposes.
Yeah, so yeah, it's like, and no one can pronounce it. There's just Justin from Bugle Bootcamp. Unnoted one time, they were like,
Buidl.
Yeah, they were talking with Stefan Livera, who took my class, and they called it Shittle Shit Camp. Like, oh man, I was Stefan Livera's first advertiser.
I think
I was the first person who ever contributed to Pierre Richard's open source project. They call it Shittle Shit Camp. I need a new name, man.
We read a Buidl Bootcamp ad on Tales from the Crypt as well.
I did.
Let's do a free ad now. Where can we find you? What can we do?
So this is the thing is like, so I started with this Buidl Bootcamp, right? And what was surprising is that a lot of the people who signed up weren't programmers. I was expecting programmers, teach them about Bitcoin. It was more like Bitcoiners who want to learn about programming. So I just sort of like lowered the expectations in the material somewhat. And so basically in the summer, I ended up making like a learn to code class where it's like zero to being able to communicate with your full node using Python in the command line, which I think any Bitcoiner should learn. So this is Mooniversity. I like that name a lot better. Mooniversity.io.
A lot better.
That's going to be a titan someday. But yeah, so Mooniversity.io, if you want to learn to code, like that's what I created. It's pretty cool. Like so I've been building a project recently and I use this editor called Visual Studio Code. An editor is like Microsoft Word if you ever write prose. An editor does that for code. And
you're not doing Sublime, dude?
No, I mean, I usually use Vim, but like when you're doing website stuff, it's hard to use Vim. So the thing is that when you're learning to code, one of the hardest things is setting up this environment, setting up your text editor, setting up your terminal.
It's for the layman, it's called the IDE, correct?
Yeah, the integrated developer environment. Yeah, you're really flexing here, Marty. You've been on Code Academy or something? Really impressed with yourself.
I may have used to work for a software.
So yeah, so the hard thing is you have to get all this shit set up, and it makes it not fun. So what I did is I basically create an environment that I use, this Visual Studio Code, really popular in a Linux environment. And this environment is running a full node, and it's all in the browser. It's like one click button. You get this like real programmer's environment in your browser. And by the end of it, so we do a couple things. It's like we implement the Bitcoin monetary policy in Python. So when you're learning a for loop, like how to do a statement repeated times, the repetition we're doing this problem is like, well, we're going to divide the issuance rate until it hits 1 Satoshi. When it drops below Satoshi, it's like, Well, that's the end of the policy. And so it's like the question is, well, how many halvenings are there? And we read a little computer program that can answer this. It's kind of cool.
And this is a good tangent fact we could go on right now. There will actually never be 21 million Bitcoin.
A little short of that.
Right, a little short.
And the program will actually produce this. Like we keep a tally of how much. So it's a really cool, like this is like the second program you ever write. And it one thing you notice is like, God damn, the Bitcoin monetary policy is front loaded. You know? It's like we can print out what it is like today, and it's like, whoa, what is it, 80% or 85%?
I saw a tweet earlier tonight. The 18 millionth Bitcoin will be mined, I believe, within the next month.
Yeah, so
or
that's
two. So we only have 3 million to go after that. So
yeah.
You are 6/7 of the way there.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Right.
So it's a cool thing to like actually have that experience writing code one of your first times. And so some of the other things we do is we like pull data off CoinMarketCap and try to say like, what was the most volatile day in Bitcoin's history. And we write a little program that can parse a CSV. Now that's valuable, like being able to parse these spreadsheets and shit from Python. That's really, so it's like a real world skill that is useful. And then we learn how to like communicate with your full node, how to like create a transaction, how to sign a transaction, and how to broadcast a transaction.
I'm sure using Python to scrape that data is a lot better than MATLAB.
I think so, yeah. Python's just great. One of the things that's so nice about it is it's like the lingua franca of programmers, that and like JavaScript.
Here's a good tangent too. So this is something I'm curious of, and I actually have to talk about on Rabbit Hole Recap tomorrow, so I really want to get your opinion on. Electrum just announced that they're going to release a Lightning implementation written in Python,
Mm-hmm.
and I wrote a Ben about it, like, hey, this is pretty cool. Python, as you're describing, seems to be a pretty popular, powerful programming language that people are using right now. So I wrote, like, hey, maybe this will be a boon to people developing on top of Lightning Network, and had a couple people come back at me and say Python may not be a good implementation language for Lightning in particular. Why would people...
Yeah, maybe not. It's a little slow. So like, you know, some of these things have to sync a lot of state. I haven't like I don't understand the Lightning protocol very well compared to I understand the Bitcoin protocol pretty well. Mm-hmm. So I'm not the best to ask this, but like for these types of languages, you want something that's a little faster, and Python's a little slower. So that's generally like maybe you couldn't manage as many channels in Electrum as you could in Lightning or something.
Or something about being able to compile before you go live or something.
Yeah, so that's another thing is like it's sort of easier to write multi-platform code in something like C Lightning to get it to run on Raspberry Pi. Like that's my struggle right now writing this multi-sig UI I've been working on is like I got it working on Windows. And then I got it working on Linux, and Windows broke. So, like, fuck me.
You fix one side of the brick wall.
And this has happened a few times now. It's like I add more features, and I get one of them work, and then the other one breaks. And so multi-platform code is hard because you have to be able to target all these different platforms and make them all work at once. So it's like something LND does really well because Golang is pretty good at that. And I think it's a little harder with Python in some cases. It's a little harder to create like a binary that can just run anywhere. Usually, a lot of the stuff you install with Python, you actually have to have Python installed on your system, and maybe some smaller systems that we'd want to run Bitcoin nodes on won't have it. Well, this would be Electrum, so this would be a desktop machine. So I don't know. I think it's fine. I think it's nice that it's good to have more diversity. Another exciting one is Rust Lightning. Like on MapCrawler's GitHub, if you're curious, there's like a really cool thing where it's like a little prototype of a Lightning node written in Rust, and it's like 2,000. It's like 1,000 lines of code or something. It's very short, and it uses Rust Lightning for everything behind the scenes. So you can really like look through what a Lightning node actually does. Like, what are the messages it gets? How can it respond to these things? It's really cool. So I think there's a lot of diversity coming there, and you see a big difference between like Bitcoin and Lightning. It's nice to have. Like one of the things I did recently is I made a C Lightning plugin for opening channels from hardware wallets. That's a feature I'd like to have in my Junction app here that we're going to talk about. One of the annoying things about Lightning is you have to fund your node, and then you have to fund your channels, right? And so it's like this extra step that sucks. So it'd be better.
I'm not going to lie. As somebody who's been using Lightning for almost a year now, it's still confusing as fuck to me.
Yeah, it's like, what am I doing? It's the mental model's hard. And so it would be better if you could just say, like, your wallet is like, here's your warm wallet. Maybe your cold storage wallet's 3 of 5. Your warm wallet's just one of those hardware wallets, your cold card or something. And it's like, hey, you want to open a channel? Just plug in your warm wallet, open a channel, and we'll it'll go directly into the channel. You never have to fund your node. Like the node stops having to fund channels. That job is taken over by someone who's better at it, a hardware wallet. Because this problem is about signing a transaction. You want signatures to happen in the most secure environment you can get. And that's the whole point of these hardware wallets, is they're tiny little secure computing environments that do one thing. Well, two or three. Like it displays information. Sometimes it generates information like a new private key. But most of all, it does a math manipulation on a private key to create a signature. And you just don't want anything else interfering with that. And you want like a one-way communication channel that can only send these, a transaction and a signed transaction back. And that's really hard in the context of like a modern operating system where there's 100, there's like 10 million lines of code and 100 programs running and different users and passwords and, all kinds of hardware that could have been manipulated along the supply chain from China to here. So that's the point of a hardware wallet, is to simplify everything. And so you outsource this funding of channels to the thing that's good at it, the hardware wallet. So this is exciting. Like LND can't do this. C Lightning can. So this is the point I was bringing up, is like you can start to see Bitcoin and Lightning diverge in terms of how it works. It's like, well, one, multiple implementations thrive, and it's good. Like C Lightning can meet my desire to do this, and LND can do other stuff, and that's perfectly fine.
You think it's good in the long run, though?
I think so. I mean, it's good that, so like, I'm not an expert on this, but like, C Lightning tries to be like very modular. Maybe like LND goes for like more features and they become more monolithic in search of more features. I think that's roughly true. I'm not an expert. So, but so this is cool because for some use cases, one of them will serve you better. Like you don't want the same implementation 5 times. That's worthless. You want 5 different implementations. So like a Python one, maybe more easier for people to integrate with because they can read the code and understand it better.
That was my assumption.
Yeah, exactly. And I agree. It's like I'm excited as a Python programmer, someone who doesn't really like reading C. I can read Go, but LND is such a big project. It's hard to really grok it all. And
I don't know, you've made it clear that you're more focused on Bitcoin at the protocol level than Lightning, but do you know why Nicolas Dorier was mad at LND?
Yeah, so the big problem was that so Lightning has a database of all the channels. And in general, like when you upgrade your software, you'll have a database and you have to migrate that database. Basically, update the structure of this data for how the database should look at the newest version. And so LND made the decision to only support these migrations between major versions, between like version 6, version 7, version 8, and not between version 6 and version 8. And that's just really hard because if somebody doesn't use their node for a while...
You're not thinking of the man in the coma.
Exactly. Which is, I mean... so they reverted it.
Yeah, they reverted it, right?
Yeah. And,
Because version 0.8.0...
But this is sort of one of these holy wars. I've seen a few times where Roast Beef and Nicholas will go at each other a little bit because, like, Roast Beef loves the Go language and Nicholas loves C#. I don't know much about either one, but they like really go at it sometimes. It's sort of funny at times.
That is, again, as an outsider,
these religious wars amongst programmers. Like, this is one of the worst parts
amongst
of being a programmer.
Languages, right? No, and that's something as I will concede that I do probably know more about coding languages and the structure of code and how it all.
Yeah, you're
like,
talking about
works
MATLAB,
together.
and you're talking.
But it still fascinates me, like the holy wars over these languages and how entrenched people get in their language and what they can do with it and how other people critique it. They get very defensive.
Yeah, it's weird, like nerd sniping. It's like how you get status in the nerd community. Sometimes it's like this is the way it works.
Is there like a Tower of Babel going on with programming languages right now? Will there ever be consolidation on one? Would you ever want that? Is that ever advantageous?
Kind of. So like you have, like, for example, mobile apps have been interesting. So you started with like 2 legacy languages. iOS has this Objective-C, Java, or Android has Java. There's like these 2 10, 20-year-old languages. And so they run these for a while, and like it got to be really pain in the ass to use these 2 very different languages. And they were both old, not great in some ways. And so like there came this thing, React Native, which is like a way to use web development techniques to make mobile apps. And so, like, I built a really early React Native app, and it was pretty cool because I could just use the skills I already had to make mobile apps. But then the thing is that each of these platforms went and developed their own native language, like Swift and Kotlin. These are the next generation ones. And so now so like, for example, Airbnb went and made this React Native app, right? Tower of Babel is gone, or whatever, or like, we all have a language to speak now. And then they end up migrating back because they were, by having to sort of like make compromises between the two different approaches, there were behaviors they couldn't accomplish. And so now they've migrated back to like the new native language, Swift and Kotlin. So it's kind of interesting. You see this like...
Is this different than React.js?
React.js is the web version. React Native is the thing that can run on like a...
And what was the big competitor? Was it React and Node?
Vue.
That's what it was, yeah.
Angular.
Yeah. That's what it was. And
but so if you want to learn about all this stuff, come take Mooniversity. Like as I was sort of saying earlier before we got sidetracked, like I like put you in an environment where
we're back to learning Python to be able to communicate with your node.
Yeah, like fucking learn to talk to your node, man. Like if you're listening to this podcast and you have never talked to your node, like can you really call yourself a Bitcoiner? Really? I
will admit. The last time I talked to my node was it was a few months ago. With just out of curiosity, I checked my bug logs to find that miner who tried to add more. Mm-hmm. He added his fees to the block reward, and he got axed for it. My node rejected it.
Nice.
Yeah. Felt good. It felt good to confirm that in the command line.
So exactly. Yeah. So these are skills that are useful, and they're sort of like. Yeah, I think this is a smart thing to do if you're in like I created this class because I saw all these people who wanted to get deeper, but they struggled to get from 0 to like 1. They just struggled to get a foothold. So I created this class to like help people get a foothold, and I've had like maybe 5% of the people actually go on and take my Buidl Bootcamp class, so that's been pretty cool. But yeah, it's like I think that if you want to understand Bitcoin a little better and you want to be able to use it more securely. Like it's really hard to have a really solid sense of security in Bitcoin without learning a little bit about software. Exactly. That's fundamentally what you're dealing with.
That's exactly. I'm happy you said that because that's like take a step back from Bitcoin, like understanding the stack, like how it all interacts with each other, like even how HTML and CSS interact with each other. Mm-hmm. How HTML is just like the hypertext and the CSS is the makeup on top of it. And then how that interacts with the MongoDB database on the back end if you're doing like a e-commerce site or something like that.
Yep. Where does the data come from?
Exactly. What's it calling to? What's it pulling from?
What does the browser do?
Yes, exactly.
And
once you I'm somebody who can't. Like,
when you learn this, you start uninstalling Chrome extensions.
Yes,
the more you learn about it. So this is like there is a benefit here. You'll be like, oh, that.
Before you even start uninstalling Chrome extensions. You get, because for a lot of people, the internet is magic. Right? Yeah. It's just magic. It just works, but it actually does have a structure and a hierarchy and an infrastructure to it. And once you understand that, it helps you get a better holistic picture of what's going on in the world in general, let alone Bitcoin.
Yeah. So as a web developer, I was working like web developer, mobile stuff, just like a product engineer startups. I learned how like the internet, I learned how the web works. I never learned how the internet works. Like how is the data actually transmitted? And so like learning about Bitcoin, you actually have to learn that because Bitcoin is a protocol right on top of the raw internet TCP.
It's a gossip protocol, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so you learn how to send and receive these messages and how to compose them, how to interpret them. And you can sort of get, like, this is one of the things, this is like the second part of my Buidl Bootcamp class. You get like close to the point of being able to do like initial block download or being able to write an SPV or a full node. Like you'll never get the true exact behavior of like a Bitcoin node, but you can write like a very naive, silly one. And at that point, you really understand what it's doing and when you need to run a full node and when you don't need to run a full node. Because it's like, there are times you don't need, if you just have like a 5-year, like John Doe, for example, like he didn't need a full node those 5 years because he wasn't spending, he wasn't receiving, he was just sitting on it.
We're talking about a former guest who had a forced hodl. He was in jail. He was holding it. He had it on Tails, right?
Something, I think he had it on Tails and a USB, and they're like, sorry, we couldn't crack the USB. Here it is. And it's like, oh, thanks. That's That's one of the interesting things about the dark web people, because I've never really interacted with them. And it's like, every once in a while you'll come across this, when you're trying to learn how to use Tor or something, you'll come across one of these sites that was written for these people. And it's like, wow, those are really best practices on security. It's like some of the best material on how to improve your OPSEC was written by these people for these people. And they really left some nice, it's no accident that guy had good OPSEC, because that's what that community actually became good at it.
Well, today's lesson, the drug dealers are much better than the pedophiles.
Exactly.
Or you freaks don't know, or I mean, you do know by now, there was a huge bust of, that's a big FUD today in Bitcoin. Did you see that?
I didn't.
You didn't see it?
I was trying to release a fucking Windows thing, man.
You didn't see this?
No.
Okay, so today, that's why I was like, oh, Justin's looking me over.
Man,
you're going into pedophiles right now? It's topical, believe me. So
he's up on the programming languages. He's up on the news. This man really gets it.
But so the FUD of today.
Uncle had his eggs this morning.
The FUD line. Uncle Marty ate his proteins, ate my scrammies, ready to go.
He didn't cook them either.
Yeah, raw yolk. But the FUD line of today is a pedophile dark market was brought down.
Jesus.
And you were just talking about how the Silk Road drug dealers had their OPSEC down pat. These idiot pedophiles, and these people should burn in hell. They should be burned at the stake. They should die. They were sending transactions right from exchange accounts to the website from which they were acquiring this terrible material, and it just and
it's one of the.
It actually it highlighted Bitcoin's lack of privacy, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Fuck those people.
Yeah, this is one of the tough things about uncensorable money, right? When we started the podcast, with this critic, I forget his name, but
Simon Mikhailovich.
Simon Mikhailovich. It's a lot of these guys will have good arguments, and because it's there are problems with Bitcoin. It'll get easier to these child porn people probably. It'll help them. It'll help arms dealers or sketchy people. It'll help a lot of sketchy people, and that's one of the things we got to be upfront about. And it's there are some costs here. It's not all roses.
Those people can also drink water. They can breathe air.
Exactly. It's hard to give them. It's hard to remove freedoms from them without removing those freedoms from yourself. At the end of the day, it's either both sides get a freedom or nobody gets it. It's hard over time. It's hard to enforce those boundaries.
Well, it seems the go-to idiom here is don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but it seems like people are more willing in today's day and age to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Well, that's one of the tough things. It's I think so often law enforcement has trouble proving a really nasty allegation, and so Al Capone, for example, right? They could never pin Al Capone for killing people.
They got him for tax fraud eventually.
So exactly. So it's you end up nailing people for these financial crimes, and that's sort of how this financial surveillance state sort of started. It's and you get these RICO acts, and you get all these different things. You start shutting down or restricting American access to Swiss bank accounts and all these things, and you start to criminalize financial acts that went along with crime. But the crime itself was never punished because they couldn't actually pin it on them. So that's where it gets really tough. It's you don't want Bitcoin to be illegal because some bad people used it. You want to do the bad things they did to be illegal, and Bitcoin is unaffected.
Well, this is why I like to fall back on the beauty on argument of Bitcoin, as it is just code at the end of the day. Beauty on doesn't like the fact that we imbue the property of money on Bitcoin, or the property of free speech.
This is scary, though.
It is free speech at the end of the day. But no, again, Bitcoin as a protocol, when you get down to it, better than I. It has no idea what we're doing. Again, it's just a gossip messaging protocol.
I don't think free speech is the place we want to put our defense, though, because it's that's getting eroded pretty quickly. LeBron James is on TV shitting on free speech these days.
No, we should fucking put our stake down, put our flag down, and be yes, this is free speech. I do think we need to stand up for free speech.
I agree with that. I'm just saying. I'm just saying that it's that's being eroded pretty quickly, I think.
Well, somebody's got to stand up and fucking fight for it, right?
I don't know. I don't really have an opinion on whether code is speech. It's in a sense, it is. Obviously, printing out code is speech. like what the whatever Zimmerman or his name was with the PGP
Well, it
stuff,
doesn't
like
matter
printing it out and putting it on.
Like, not trying to be a dickhead here, but does it matter what you or I think? Hasn't it already been deemed by the Supreme Court as speech?
I think the printing out of code was deemed as speech, like
Really?
the distribution of code, but I don't know if it was the execution of code. Like there's a little bit of a difference there. Like,
Some
you know,
nuance.
like if you press a button that runs a computer program that nukes a city or something, it's like, was that act speech? I don't know. I mean, there's obviously like physical things that happen.
Yeah, but
like,
where's the crime there? Is it when the nuke's created? Is it when it's
It's a good point. This is an argument I think other people are better at than me.
No,
It's
let's
like,
get into it.
I just punt. It's like, man, these like moral questions are just like, I don't know.
So what do you focus on? What broad strokes do you like to focus on? You like building shit, obviously.
Yeah, I like.
What do you focus on, and like what dictates your decision making?
So like within, I mean, I'll start within Bitcoin and maybe say more generally. So like in Bitcoin, I get excited about the things that I think are really important. Like I have to really be convinced that something's important to even show up. Otherwise, I just won't. So within Bitcoin, it's like I thought that teaching was important because I struggled myself to learn how it worked. And I could see that, like, you know, there's like 30 core contributors, right? Like, ooh, it'd be better if there were more of those. Like, and you know, there weren't very many good wallets. There were only a couple hardware wallets. Like, okay, more developers would be good, so I'm gonna go work on that. And then after like 9 months of that, I started to think like, this is the next thing I did after the Mooniversity is I did this thing called Bootcamp. So part of the inspiration for that is like, my own struggle is like using wallets, right? Like, so the first time I ever used a Trezor, when I had to upgrade the firmware,
When you got to hit the button down at the same time.
well, so no, so it's like I was like, okay, I got to check the seed, right? And I've been teaching people about Bitcoin for 6 months. Like, I should know a lot about this. So I tried to go verify the seed because I wrote the seed down. And I tried to verify it on a separate computer. So I had like an offline machine where I loaded the seed in and tried to check that the addresses were the same. And they weren't. I was like, what the fuck? So when I set this up, I just assumed when I set this up, I wrote down the wrong thing or something. I couldn't figure it out. And then, and I ended up having to sweep the wallet. I should have like reached out to some friends, but I swept the wallet to somewhere new. I was probably embarrassed that like this happened, so I didn't want to tell anybody. So I swept the funds to a different wallet, and like it worked. It was fine, but I was like, holy fuck! I almost like lost the first big chunk of Bitcoin I had because I didn't understand how the wallets worked. Well, I'm teaching a class about Bitcoin. Like this is wrong. It turned out the problem is when I checked the wallets, I checked them in Electrum. And Electrum by default has a different seed format, and so I imported my BIP39 seed or BIP44.
They're BIP39.
BIP39, yeah.
Electrum's
as
BIP39.
as Electrum seeds, and so it got the wrong stuff. And so like, it's like, damn, we need to teach. If this could happen to me, like this, we need to like teach people how to like.
I have a very similar story, and one I'm actually probably more ashamed of than you are because it wasn't my money. Like,
Yeah.
while I was at Barstool. And people were like, hey, I'm in, like, the few people who looked at me were like, hey, I'm in Bitcoin for the long run. Like I don't have a hardware wallet yet. Like, where should I, like, keep it? I was like, Electrum was my go-to.
Yeah.
And I had one case in particular where somebody put some Bitcoin in an Electrum wallet, and in the middle when Electrum was getting DDoS, like, they couldn't access. No, he didn't get phished. He just couldn't access his Bitcoin.
Oh, yeah.
He couldn't send it off of the Electrum wallet. And I had to explain, like, they have a different seed phrase like structure, and it doesn't work. Like, you think you can get recover your seed on your Trezor, but you're not because they do it. Like, just trying to explain the nuances of Electrum versus the other wallets. So I was like, fuck, like maybe I'll think 3 times before giving that advice in the future.
So that's what. So I was like, okay, I have a new idea for class, HODL Bootcamp. We'll basically teach people to set up wallets and to recover them. And do this all on testnet, so it's practice, right? So, and that's also nice for like legally, like I'm not like helping them on mainnet, so I could get sued or something. I was just like, it's all fake money, just practice, and then you can do with these skills what you will. And it was really cool. Like, people loved it. Like 350 people signed up, and I got like half the way through, and I was trying to teach them how to do like multi-sig and Electrum, and it was like, fuck, this is complicated. and it sucks. And like, oh, here you forgot to pip install like a Python package, and like, oh, here you accidentally set it as single sig and not multi-sig, and you know, this and that. And it's like, oh, by the way, you set it up, and now all those addresses went to Chainalysis. And so now run your Electrum server, and it's like there's all this stuff going on, and I got to the point where I was like, man, maybe it would just be better to spend some time trying to make another way for people to do multi-sig, because like I want to redo my own cold storage, right? Because now what I was doing it to begin with is I should probably like if it 10x's or something, I'm not going to be very comfortable. So I was like, I want to redo my own cold storage, and I've like struggled with Electrum. There's not really a good like I want to do multi-sig. Mostly because it's like multi-sig. The big way to think about it is there's like you can't be taken out by a single thing. If you like in theory, if you do it right, no single thing will just take you out, just lose all your coins. You'd have to fuck up twice.
There's no silver bullet.
Yeah. Well, no. This is kind of the opposite idea. Like there's no silver bullet means like there's no one thing that will do to fix all your problems. But on the opposite side, it's like with multi-sig, you get this idea. So there's no one bullet that can kill you. You can take one hit if you have a 2 of 3. If you have a 3 of 5, you can take 2 hits. You get shot twice and survive. You can lose 2 of those keys. And so that's really appealing, not just from like the chances that you actually keep your own money, but just the ability to sleep at night. You know, like sort of having to fend for yourself. Like the individual sovereignty that you get with Bitcoin is like it's like a right, but more a responsibility. It's like it's a weight you carry. It's a big weight you carry. And so like multi-sig helps to make that lighter because you're like, hey man, I can drop some of this and be okay.
It's like a pulley system.
It's a pulley system, yeah. It's like leverage. So that's why I want to do multi-sig. And like I gave a talk at BitBlock Boomis conference about it. Like the big thing you want is like you just want the different keys in your setup to be generated in a different way, to be stored in a different way, to be manipulated in a different way. And so like if these ways are all sort of different, like on a different computer architecture, written in a different programming language, a different supply chain, a different group of corporate governance, like hiring people or whatever, like separate sets of employees. If like one of these elements goes rogue and steals one of your keys, it's like if you're truly segregated, the other ones won't be affected by that same thing. So a lot of this was inspired by talks with Michael Flaxman. He had a great episode on Stefan Livera that I'd suggest.
Legendary episode.
Yeah.
All hardware wallets are fucked.
Yeah, so he's one of my good friends in Austin and one of the loyal attendees of my meetup, Austin Bitcoin Developers.
So let's get into this. We're talking about the Austin Bitcoin Developers meetup before we hit record. And Justin is pretty keen on explaining what it's like to run a meetup because what's it like?
I think it's something people should look into, right? So like I moved to Austin because I was like I went and did like startup stuff in San Francisco and then got kind of burnt out on it, went traveling, and I come back to the States and I'm like, so where do I go? Right? I don't want to go to San Francisco or New York City because it's like I don't really want to jump right back into a job again. So like I went to Austin because it's a little cheaper. You got more leeway. And I show up and it's like I don't really have any friends. I have some friends, but none of them are like Bitcoin people. And I'm like, at that time, I'm like going 90 miles per hour down the rabbit hole. Like I am, one of those like skydivers. I'm skydiving down the rabbit hole.
You got the bat suit on?
Yeah, speeds unreached before going down so fast. And so I wanted to meet some of these people. And it's like I DM a few of them on Twitter and they'd be like, yeah, maybe. And it's like, but they don't want to meet some rando, right? And so it's like, so I'm like, fuck it, I'm gonna make a meetup and get these people to come to me. And so the first one I did, I found a co-working space and booked an hour. And I told them like I'd be able to pay them a bunch of money in like 3 months. And of course that was a lie. But we did I did a class about a thing about using Wireshark to analyze the network traffic of Bitcoin. Like, so what happens?
What is Wireshark?
Wireshark is a tool that can analyze packets sent through your like network cards. So you can actually see what messages leave your Bitcoin node, what messages receive. So you can like watch it catch blocks. Like you can make a filter that say, look for blocks. Like look for packets that contain the word block, or maybe it's like a code. I know it would be an ASCII block because that's the name of the message in Bitcoin.
Is this how you would try to find malicious nodes? Or?
No. So this is just to see just to understand what your Bitcoin node is doing. Like a malicious node, you'd probably be able to find in the logs easier, where your node rejects that stuff, assuming your node is actually doing what you want it to do. But this is just like, sees like, what the hell is my node doing? Because we all hear like run a Bitcoin node, but I feel like very few people know what it is actually doing. And so like Wireshark is a cool tool where you can set a couple queries like, hey, I want it to spy on port 8333, that's the peer-to-peer port, and I want maybe the TCP protocol or something. And you could also say, I want the ASCII interpretation of the message to contain block. And so there, every 10 minutes you'll see a message, or probably a little more because you'll receive it more than once. You only respond to it the first time, right? You update your blockchain, but the second time you're like, hey, I already know about that. You'll see transactions come across. You'll see all kinds of stuff come across. And so it's kind of cool to see what it does. And so 4 people showed up to this meetup. 2 of them I have never seen since that day. And then one of them is Alex Hardy, this like really cool dude who used to live in New York.
Love Alex.
He was like visiting for a business trip, and now he's moved to Austin, and we're like homies.
Huge shout out to Alex Hardy.
Yeah, so and
he was one of my homies in New York, dude. One of my favorite breakfast dates was Alex Hardy.
Yeah, it's like he's a really cool dude. And so the other guy is this guy Richard, who is one of the like foremost testers of C Lightning software. He did this like multi-pay plugin that allows you to in one on-chain payment, fund multiple channels. It's really cool. So he was one of the people that came to the meetup. And like we're like buddies. So 2 weeks ago, we got together at a coffee shop and made a plugin to open Lightning channels from hardware wallets. And so it's like...
I have to interject here to yell at Alex Hardy. I know you're listening. We need a new proof of take. It's about time. That's about it.
So yeah, so like the point is like within one meetup, it was worth it. I made 2 friends. And I'm still friends with both these people. And like as it went, it's like I got to meet every Bitcoiner in my city. That's been really cool. It's like now I can sort of, like I'm friends with Michael Flaxman and Bitsy and all these people, and I didn't know them before. And I think that's true. You know, this is, there's probably some hidden Bitcoiners in your city if you're listening. And if you create one of these little events and put the word out, you can probably get a few of them to show up. And like that's worth it just for starters. And it's also like one of the other fun things about running a meetup is you're sort of like accountable to be on top of things. So like we've switched to this to begin with, I tried to like get speakers. At the start, I gave the talks, which was really challenging. Then I got exhausted and invited speakers. That lasted like 6 months, and we switched to the Socratic style.
It's incredible.
So the idea with the Socratic style is you have sort of a facilitator who brings up various topics.
Shout out to Jay here in New York.
Yeah, so there's like one guy who perfected
and
this
John
art
Newberry.
form.
So it's Jay and John Newberry, basically.
Yeah. And Will O'Byrne, who abandoned you.
Will abandoned us.
Come to
I was
the
just
greatest
about to say,
city in the world, Austin, Texas.
You guys are too lucky to have Will. Will, I miss you. Will, I miss you.
Yeah, so...
Luckily, we still have James and Michael up here.
So the idea is like you have these facilitators that lead people through a number of topics, and they sort of start dialogue, and you sort of pull knowledge out of the audience. And so this is really cool because like in Austin, we have like Jimmy Song, Flaxman, Bitstein, the people at Unchained, Polstra, Johnny Dilly sometimes, Kander, a bunch of these people. And so it's like you can get these people to basically run your meetup for you. But you have to be on top of like the ability to sort of like lead the conversation.
Yeah, so Jay does it incredibly here in New York, where he has him and John Newberry at this point gets just as much credit. Jay will go through white papers and just general computer science.
Security vulnerabilities
issues
on some platform.
John comes in, runs through BIPs, and where certain BIPs are, we'll talk about
pull
Lightning
requests,
for a little bit.
You know, like what's happening to the Bitcoin Core wallet.
Yes, Will would come in.
Lightning apps.
And he does Lightning apps and demonstrations.
Yeah.
And it just starts, and here in New York, we're spoiled where some months you'll have Peter Todd walk in and just start like raising his hand and like putting ideas out about certain topics. And it's actually hilarious. I have to note, earlier this year during Consensus, Matt Odell was not at BitDevs, and it was the night that we demoed his final message app. Mm-hmm. And Peter Todd was at the demo and did not critique the app. So Matt was not there to see that Peter Todd did not like his app. Which Matt, I know you're gonna be bad about that for life, but it was just hilarious being there. I was like, Peter Todd didn't critique it, dude. You're good.
It's a pass, man.
But no, the format is, it just, again, like in Socratic, what is Socratic? It's open. It's not even debate. It's just open questioning, right?
Yeah.
Like why? Like explain. Like if even at BitDevs, if you are a novice and you're not technically competent, which has happened many times, people walked in thinking it's just a meetup where you can ask any questions. People are nice. Like, hey, most of the room may already know the answer to this, but we will take the time to answer it for you and explain the context of this answer and why it may be important pertaining to Bitcoin.
It's one of the interesting things about running a meetup is you want something that appeals to noobs and the pros. It's like if Jimmy and Brian Bishop stop coming to my meetup, that sucks. But if noobs stop coming and it's just these like advanced people, that also kind of sucks because it's not a community. And so, yeah, striking that balance is really interesting. But my point in all this is like running a meetup for me has been a great way to meet all these people in a new city. Like I know so many of the people who are interested in share. It's not just this that they bought the same thing I did and have similar investment views to me. It's that they have views about, like shared views about what human action is acceptable.
Core values.
Yeah, like really core values.
Yeah.
And so you can sort of build friendships on these shared values and have deeper conversations than you can with like the regular people in your own life who don't share some of these values. And so it's I'm a big proponent of joining the meetup if there is one, starting one if there isn't one. And I know some people are a little concerned about like being publicly known as a Bitcoiner or something. Like for me, it's been totally worth it. To meet all these like great people, because I'm sort of like a disagreeable person. Like if I take a personality test,
I was gonna bring this up. I thought I was gonna shock you with it. The last time you were here, we were on my roof smoking cigarettes, drinking wine late at night. What you said this to me? You are 99% disagreeable.
Yes, I took like a couple personality tests. I always assumed I was introverted because I don't get along with people, or like I tend to like not spend a lot of time with people. And no, it turns out I'm just highly disagreeable. I just don't like people. Like I like to be around people.
I find this hard to believe because I like being around you. I love.
Well, yeah, that's because we like agree on stuff. I'm a little more frictious.
What do we disagree on? Where can I see the bad side of Justin, man? That's what I want to know.
We'll get there. But yeah, so like, why were we bringing this up? I'm making all these admissions on your podcast.
Well, this will happen. You're saying you're disagreeable, and you're saying a meetup.
Oh yeah, so it's like I don't make a lot of friends because it's like, I have like some really close friends, but like most people I don't really want to be around. And so Bitcoin is like this outlet to find a lot of people that I do want to be around. And they're different. They're not all like programmer nerds like me. Or they're not all, it's a diverse group, and they share some values with you, so that like in the second conversation, you can have a really substantive conversation or something. You go and barbecue a steak with them, and you like talk about real shit. It's like, oh, this is a surprise. So I'm a big proponent of starting a meetup. Like I've had a number of students in my classes now. I think like the France meetup or the Paris meetup is one of my students. Halifax. There's like 3 or 4 actually more than that. I mean, Stefan, he's not like he's his own thing, but like he runs a meetup. There's a number of them that run meetups, and I think it's a really good thing, and I encourage people to do it.
I think you're gonna look back, dude, and be proud. I do of teaching all these people and planting these seeds and getting these ideas out there. Because, like, what's life worth living if you can't go out there and find the people that you want to build your future with, right? Like,
yeah, so that's what I was talking about earlier. Is like, why am I into Bitcoin? Is like, I want to find things that are like really, really important, or I just like can't get motivated. And so like this teaching thing was definitely one of them. And I mean, yeah, it's cool to see like I think 4 or 5 of my students are speaking at this Lightning conference. It's like cool to see them sort of graduate and like go out into the world, and I just played a small part. Like most of it was their own characteristics. Like I have one student who's now like doing like Will Clark. He's like doing this really cool like Lightning over mesh network stuff with Gotenna, and it's like I helped him, but it was mostly him. And that's the cool thing to be around these people. It's like they were going to get there regardless of you, but you can sort of help them. It's just a great group of people to be friends with. So like every conference I go to, there's like 10, 15, 20 of us. And it's like, I really know these people now. And we have all these like shared jokes because they like went through this whole curriculum. And
well, having gone through a boot camp myself, not a Bitcoin boot camp in any sense of the imagination, but just a boot camp where you're constrained for 10 to 12 weeks with a very small group of people with very different goals at the end of the day, but a very broad general goal that they're all striving towards. You find like everybody feeds off each other, and it's just like everybody trying to pull the best information from everybody else and level everybody else up. And that, I think, and like we can circle back to the way education works in general and how it works today. Like I agree. I think that the whole world should adopt the Montessori mindset, like mixed age groups, just gently nudge people into what they're interested in and say, hey, you're interested in this, here's what you need to know to become more interested, and things will just work out.
I mean, that's like, I feel like I've had a little bit of that at times, but it hasn't been perfect. And so it's like, that's my big question in life right now is like, do I want to keep working on this education stuff or build products?
Yeah. So
Bitcoin products.
That was the big conversation we had the last time you were here.
Yeah.
So since the last time Justin's been on the podcast, he's had the Buidl Bootcamp, he's done everything he's described, and now you're getting into hardware and Junction and...
Yeah, so this is like like when I was talking about this HODL Bootcamp thing, like trying to teach people to use wallets, it's like I got a little ways through that, I was like, fuck, some of these wallets suck ass, you know? Like, sorry to cuss twice in 4 words.
Most of these wallets suck ass.
Yeah, and the software wallets aren't good, the hardware wallets aren't great, and so like I started to like neglect my responsibilities as a teacher and sort of spend more time programming. And so the first thing I did is I wrote a hardware wallet. And part of this is because we do some of these exercises in my Buidl Bootcamp class, but I really wanted to learn like what goes into making a hardware wallet. I was at like BitBoy, it was kind of popular on Twitter. It was like a QR air gapped hardware wallet, so like
that thing was sweet, and it was all PSTB, PTSB, excuse me,
PSBT,
partially signed Bitcoin transactions.
PSBT.
That's what I said.
I've heard you fuck this up so
I fucked
many
it up.
times.
I said PSBT.
You did.
Did I say TB?
I don't remember, but you fucked it up
twice. I said PSBT.
So, so it's all PSBT, and but yeah, it's just cool to see what goes into making a hardware wallet. And so, like, what are the considerations? What information does a hardware wallet have available? What doesn't it? What can it check? What can't it check? I made my hardware wallet stateless, meaning between turning it on, there's actually nothing stored, assuming that the memory is actually wiped.
You have to plug your seed in at the beginning.
You have to enter the seed in on a keyboard every time, and that's kind of cool because this would be nice if you created a paper wallet. There's this like cool tool called Seed Picker, for example, that'll direct you through printing out all the seed words, cutting them out into little pieces of paper, sticking them in the hat, and drawing your seed words. So you draw 23 words, and then the fourth one, they have like a little computer script to create the 24th, because that includes a checksum, which means it's basically a check that this one goes with all the other ones. It's a check against typos. So if you type in the wrong word for word 11, the checksum, the 24th word won't match. And so this is it's
a fail-safe.
It's a fail-safe just to check if you made a typo. It's to help the user. And so this is...
I like that.
The seed picker, yeah, it's a cool thing. So like you can create that. You don't need a hardware wallet. You can roll dice if you just want to create your seed in like a multi-sig, for example. Like if you're doing a 3 of 5, you only need 3 hardware wallets in order to like start spending. The other 2 seeds could be like backup seeds, and a good device to recover those, to actually spend those if you ever need to, would be something like a BitBoy, or a more advanced version of it's like a Crypto Advance. This is an actual company that's doing something similar. Since it's stateless, you can enter a seed in, spend the funds, and then wipe the device and start all over. So that's like kind of a cool thing. It's a little different model than other devices.
So in this scenario, could you have like a seed phrase in a BitBoy, which would have been the 4th and 5th signatures in that 3 of 5 setup? And if somebody were to find that seed phrase in that cookbook, would they be able to tell that it's part of a multisig?
You can find, if you get a seed...
The point I'm trying to get at here is...
Yeah,
like,
I can answer that. So if you can tell if it's part of a multisig only after 1 or more of the outputs have been spent. Because a multisig uses a construction called pay to script hash. So like in the beginning, we paid to public keys and public key hashes. And so these would be like when you create an output, a UTXO, basically a Bitcoin, inside that, it would include a public key or the hash of a public key, which is, it basically just means a way of sort of like hiding what key it was, but a way to check later on that the same key is used again.
So Satoshi, all of his coins are in pay-to-pub key.
Yeah, exactly. So this construction has the script, meaning like the encumbrance, the thing that actually defines the conditions under which you can spend your coins, exists in the transaction output, right? And so what pay-to-script hash did is it said, well, for multisig, that gets kind of expensive because you have to put, like, let's say 3 of 5. The way a 3 of 5 multisig looks in the script, the Bitcoin's programming language, it will say op3. That means I want 3 signatures. And after that, 5 public keys will be there. And each one of those is like, I forget how many bytes, but they're a lot. And then it says op check multisig, which means I want to check of these 5 that there are 3 matching signatures presented to me. And this is a lot of data to put into an output because the spender has to pay for an output because Bitcoin charges per byte of a transaction presented to miners, right? So the fee would all go to the sender, but the sender doesn't actually get the value. The sender has no benefit of this multisig address. It's the receiver who gets the benefit of receiving to a multisig, more secure address. And so what pay-to-script hash did is it put that responsibility to the recipient. And so you'd pay to a hash of this script, and then when the recipient who owns the multisig wallet wants to spend it, they would have to present this script. So the script went to the inputs. So when you spend, now you have to present a script. And so it sort of changed a little bit the way it is. And yeah, I forget exactly why I was bringing this up.
Dude, you just explained that very, like, I follow along the whole way.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, I've been doing this a lot. Yeah, so it's like this pay-to-script hash was it was like a different way of assigning.
It's basically like an extra layer of security too, right?
Oh, so yeah, that was your question. Is under what conditions can I know that this is part of a multisig?
Yeah.
And so the answer is once one has been spent, if you have the public key, the master public keys, you can derive that with because you have to see someone to present what that public keys were. The public keys aren't presented when the outputs are created. The public keys are presented when the outputs are spent. So that's the big difference between.
So you put the burden on the receiver instead of the sender.
Yeah. So it's like So once you start spending multisig, you start to the person can if somebody got a hold of these public keys, they could see like, oh, this is part of a multisig. Interesting. I mean, this gets to one of these really interesting questions. So yeah, I've been let's segue to Junction a little bit. So I did this HODL Bootcamp and I was like, fuck man, maybe I could write a better wallet than some of these, or not a better one, but just like maybe I could try to give my effort. Because like what Bitcoin is like everyone sort of gives their effort, and like one of us will kick the ball forward. It might not be me, it might not be you, but someone will kick it forward. Like we should all take our shot at it, right? And so I was like, I got to take my shot, And it was also a little bit of, it's like I'm teaching this class about Bitcoin programming. It's like at the beginning I was not qualified to be teaching this class.
Fuck it, dude.
But somehow they
Who
liked
else was
it.
going to do it?
Somehow they liked it, yeah. I mean, I always have a refund. Like every one of my students can get a refund. So I was like, and it just proved to these people I can actually do it. So I decided to create a multisig wallet. And partially because I didn't feel comfortable doing multisig with my Electrum server, or with Electrum. Like there's, so I just didn't really like using Electrum. I mean, it's kind of like, it gets to like this question, like the last week I've been kind of confused, like what does it mean to run a node even? Which is kind of weird. Like I've been studying.
Just as last week?
What does it mean to run a node? Because it's like, I asked this question on Twitter. So Bitcoin nodes have this thing called RPC. It's a way to send HTTP post requests. And you send a lot of these every day. Every time you submit a login form on the internet, on the web, you submit an HTTP post. This is contains like your username and password, and it's supposed to like modify the database to make you logged in. And so that's what this RPC is. So it's just those, and there's a bunch of commands. Like for example, there's list transactions. You can broadcast transactions.
The login credentials giving you access to the data on the node?
Yeah, basically. So
Okay.
you can query the blockchain. You can see what the height is. You can see what coins are involved in a wallet. If private keys are enabled, you can spend and generate addresses and all kinds of stuff. So this RPC is called. And it's like, so with my Junction thing, I'm trying to basically utilize this to make a wallet and connect directly to my Bitcoin node, right? Like I don't want to connect through a middleman. I don't want a middleman with my fucking node. Are you kidding me? I want to talk to my node. And so it's like, so one thing that's really hard is it's hard to, like Bitcoin Core has sort of like punted on the authentication to this. They used to have an encryption, like TLS, it's called, encrypted connection to this thing, and they removed it, I think, because it was extra complex and because it was largely like exchanges that were basically getting free tech support from Bitcoin Core developers and stuff. I don't know enough to judge them on their decision. I assume it was the right decision, but it like for me as an application developer and as a hodler, it's like, well, it sort of stinks that I can't authenticate to my Bitcoin node in an easy way. Like if you have a nodl, right? Or if you had a nodl,
yes.
If it hadn't been stolen.
It was stolen.
If it hadn't been stolen, like you could maybe run a server, a program on your computer that would talk to it, and it would talk over RPC, like the direct language that your Bitcoin node talks.
Yeah, my Casa node still does this.
Exactly.
Via an extension. Yeah.
So you want to be able to do this, but like the core developers generally frown upon it. They say, don't ever use this. Only do it if it's on the same computer, right? So that means like if you're running it, I think generally a full node should probably run on basically a server, like a little node in your corner. It probably shouldn't be running on your laptop. Like, do you want to spend 20% of your disk space on a node? Probably not. Do you want to always have it running? I mean, it's like you have to always have it running when you're using the computer, so everything's going to be slower. On the other hand, it's not always running because you turn your laptop off. So it's just probably better to have it on a separate machine. And so this makes it a little harder because there's no authentication between these two machines built into Bitcoin Core, really. It's not like secure authentication. And so it's like, well, so what do you do as an application developer? Well, you talk like an Electrum server, and it's like, okay, you told me to run a Bitcoin node, now I'm running two, right? And it's like, okay, well, if I want to, do any like small payments, it's like now you got me running an LND too. And to do that, I got to run a watchtower, and it's like, goddamn, I've been scammed.
Bandwidth costs are fucking building up, dude.
I've been scammed, yeah. Now I have 4 nodes when I signed up for 1, So it's kind of like, to me, it's confusing. Like, what does it mean to run a node? Like, I'm trying to create a software that's called Junction. I'm trying to create software that would facilitate the creation of multi-sig hardware wallet cold storage. So I want to get a group of devices, and I want to set up a wallet between those that can securely receive large amounts of money.
How do you make this possible?
So I don't know yet. So this is like my hack at it, right? So I don't think I have the answers.
And I got the walkthrough through the hack tonight, and I think you're pretty close.
Yeah. There's like a couple parts in setting up a multi-sig wallet that works. Like, I think the first big challenge is like, how do you know when you receive funds? Like when you set up this group of devices, how are you able to verify that these funds you receive will actually be spendable by you, right? Because that's really the important thing, because there are multiple devices involved, and you want to know that, like, if let's say you have a 2 of 3, that's the simplest case. You want to know that any 2 of 3 could spend these funds that you're going to receive. Because if only 2 of them can spend, now you're just doing like basically a complicated brittle single sig, because it's like you have 2 things that both have to be there. You lose your redundancy. So you want to know that any permutation of the signers required, like the 2 in this case, can sign, right? So if you ledger, Trezor, cold card.
When you talk about permutation, what do you mean by permutation?
It's a choosing of, sorry, I got it, I'm a math guy. So like Trezor, ledger, cold card, right? You want to know that the Trezor and the ledger can both spend. You want to know that the ledger and the cold card can both spend. And you want to know that the Trezor and the cold card can spend. You want to know that anybody can team up.
Any combination.
Any combination works, right? And so there's not one like rogue involved. that won't be able to spend. And so this is a big problem when you're like, the biggest transaction you ever receive in Bitcoin is probably like the first or second time you redo your cold storage, right? You have a couple inputs that are big. I don't speak for myself. I'm like class of 2018 Bitcoiner. This is a problem I hope to have in the future, right? Like, fuck me. But like, for people who are like, when I'm trying to think about who to design software for, it's like those are the people who have a big problem, and we need to alleviate that problem for Bitcoin for them to stick around. So like, if you're redoing that first cold storage, the biggest transaction you'll ever receive is when you send money to yourself. It's really like change in a sense,
well,
but it's
the output.
Yeah, the output.
Let's get nitty gritty here. And we were talking about this before we hit record. Like, I've only ever thought about the input of transaction when I send it from a hardware wallet. I never think to double check the output. Like, where's the change going?
Exactly. So that's what like the first big challenge of a multi-sig wallet is how to verify when you're receiving funds that you will be able to spend them under any condition that you expect to be able to spend them, right? And so what that means is that basically each one option would be to present a UI on your JavaScript app or your mobile app that will check this for you. It can say like, well, here are the master public keys, right? So each hardware wallet will contribute one of these master public keys. And this is basically a way of deriving a number of addresses, right? So each one of these is sort of like a factory for new addresses, right? So the first address will take sort of the first child of each of these three public keys and put that into that will become the address.
We're getting into derivation paths.
Yeah, derivation paths. Yeah, it's not that complicated, honestly.
But it's still
important to. So this is what I was talking about.
It's so
earlier.
complicated
like,
to me, even, dude.
It's hard to really use. It's hard to really sleep well at night and to not be an idiot. Like, because you can be an idiot and sleep well at night, but like if you're not an idiot, it can be hard to sleep well at night using Bitcoin. And so yeah, so it's worth learning a little bit about this. And so the way to like verify this is you don't want to check it on your desktop machine, on your computer that's connected to the internet, on your computer that you use to do whatever, that you click on random PDFs from your accountant, that you plug random keyboards into and mice into, and you download torrents from the internet for movies you don't want to pay for, or whatever. You install the Zoom audio calling thing, right? It's like a virus, it turns out. Yeah, so
still a Zoom user.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so you're wrecked.
Sorry.
So that's kind of the idea, is like, you don't want to check that on your internet connected machine. That's why we have hardware wallets, is it's a simple, minimal computational environment to do these sort of things, and it has a screen on it, so you can like check your address there. And so you want to basically be able to perform. You don't want to perform this on your host machine. You want to perform this on the hardware wallet. And so one of the hard things. So let's talk about single sig. If you have one private key involved, that one private key will exist in your hardware wallet. And when you send an address across, you can say, hey, this is an address created with this type of script, like pay to pub key hash are the two popular ones. It could say which one it is. And it could say basically the derivation path, which just means in practice, it means which child is it? Is it the first address, the second address, the third? And so the hardware wallet will just be able to go say, okay, I'm going to start at the parent, the master, and if this is the 9th child, I'm going to go do 9 child, go find 9 children.
So when you talk about children, you're talking about the first 9 public addresses that are created.
And so you go and check the 9th public key, and you turn that into an address, and you just check if the address that your host machine had matches what the address that your
What's the difference between, I can't believe I'm drunk enough to be unabashed.
Willing to ask this?
To be willing to ask it. What's the difference between an address and a pub key?
A script.
Not a script and a pub key, but like an address and a pub key.
Yeah. So
isn't a pub key an address? Isn't that interchangeable?
So you can have the same pub key, and you can use that in pay to pub key. I actually don't even think there's a way of encoding that as an address. You can encode. I'm not sure about that. It's so ancient, I forget. But you can use that one pub key. Let's say it's just all zeros for the sake of argument. I think that's a valid pub key. All zeros. you can use that for a pay-to-pub key hash transaction. Or you could use that as one of 3 keys. So that's single signature. That's one private key involved. You could also use that as one of 3 keys in a multi-sig address. And so these would be 2 separate addresses, but with the same key. So,
yes.
so that's the difference, is like when you have a key, you also need the type of script involved. Basically, what set of, basically what puzzle needs to be solved with this key, right?
And what dictates
what
dictates that is where the keys are manipulated, right? At which public key below the master key. So we're like 48 was an example earlier.
Yeah.
That would be the 48th public key, basically the 48th public address. That's the way I understand it.
Kind of, yeah.
You can accept Bitcoin to under that master branch.
Yeah, so that's like roughly the idea of how multisig
is roughly close enough,
that's
or is
close.
it not
So
good?
so the 48 was involving like a native SegWit multisig address. So that was defined. There's like a special set of children that you go to if you're looking for multisig, and so the bigger reason here is that the bigger reason here is like, let's say you're using a vendor who's doing multisig for you, right? And they go away. It's like, well, how do you go and find those keys again? So the challenge is like if your wallet software goes away, you still have the seed. That's like the master private key. It's like a factory of private keys, right? And the way this thing works is like it can create children.
That's your master key, basically.
Yeah, your master key. The master key can create children. It can create, I forget how many millions, like billions and billions of them. Like it's like 30. I forget. I don't want to be wrong, but it can create a lot of them. And the thing is, each one of those can create children. So it's not like a linear thing where it's like, yeah, it's like it's not like a bunch of. It's a tree. You have one parent, and you can create this whole tree. And so, given that each one of these can be millions of possibilities, sometimes it's challenging to go and find if somewhere in this tree there exists a private key with Bitcoin stored on it. It can be challenging to go and navigate this tree and find that private key. And so that's the point of common.
It could turn out to a point where you're looking for a needle in a haystack.
Yeah, it's a needle in a haystack, right? And so the solution to that is we have for certain types of things. So the user will remember, I did native SegWit multisig, right? And so there's a path for that. It's like 0, 48, I forget exactly what it is, like 48, something like that. But
if it was like wrapped multisig,
then it's like slightly different. Instead of a 2 at the end, there's a 1, I think. And there's also a difference in this. There's 2 types of children. There's like hardened and unhardened children. This is like really in detail, but a hardened child, if you ever heard of this, it just means that to do that production, you needed the private key. You can't do it from the public key. So like I was talking to Marty earlier, like when he puts up his store on BTC Pay, he puts up one of these ones that's a child of an unhardened key because to create a bunch of change addresses to present invoices to his people looking for his
to you freaks,
yeah. You need these. You need the server shouldn't have access to the private key, right? 'Cause that's the whole point. You don't want this insecure web server to be able to steal my money. It just has the public keys, so that's unhardened derivation. Hardened derivation is when you have the private key. Unhardened derivation is when you only have the public key. And so the big difference here is like when a private key is involved, that is security. You can lose funds because anybody who has that thing can move Bitcoin if in a single sig case, if they have enough of them, they can move it in a multi-sig case. But if you just have public keys, it's only privacy information. And that bleeds into security a little bit. If someone knows you have a lot of Bitcoin, that becomes a security problem. It's not just a privacy problem. So the two bleed.
Well, if you have a situation in which you're in BTC Pay server being the example I'm using now, where you're creating new invoices with new addresses, I'd like to be able to think that you'll be able to preserve your privacy moving forward. Like, is there so coin selection within wallets right now is a big problem. So that's what leads to the problem you're alluding to. Is if like you're taking donations and from a bunch of people, and then you're going to consolidate them into one UTXO or whatever. You have the problem of privacy. When you consolidate those, they know, if you're consolidating them all into this UTXO, we can assume that you own or received all of these UTXOs.
Exactly. So that's one of the. I mean, this is one of the. I mean, it's kind of a different problem than what the multisig is like more for security. It's like so I can shoot myself twice.
It's to make sure nobody can $5 wrench.
I want to be able to take 2 bullets and still be able to have my money. That's the 3 or 5. That's why you do 3 or 5. That's why you buy Costas.
Right now we're talking about how do we make sure nobody knows exactly how much money I have.
Yeah, and so that's a separate problem.
Right.
And I guess we can sort of like I haven't finished talking about Junction, but let's sort of move on to this one too. Because this is.
Am I fucking things up?
No. This is interesting because this is how it is to work in Bitcoin. It's
You're talking to like a natural idiot here trying to think through this.
This is the interesting thing is like this is how I work too. It's like I learn about security. And it's like well fuck. Then like I learned a little bit more about privacy and want to move over there. So like. A couple weeks ago, I was at a hackathon. It was a shitcoin hackathon. It was Caitlin Long's cat.
That was light shitcoin.
It was sponsored by Cardano. That's a shitcoin.
All right. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
I did not know that. All right, heavy shitcoin.
Anybody who has, I have a great picture of Charles. Selling his shitcoin to a bunch of children, yeah.
No.
In front of a whiteboard.
Can we use this?
I need the right name for it.
Can we use this as the artwork for this episode?
Yeah, let's do it.
This will be the only unique artwork for any episode everyone's going to do. I'm dead serious. Like, remind yourself to send that to me. Okay. That's what we're going to use.
I was at a shitcoin hackathon.
I'm sorry for trying to act like it wasn't a shitcoin hackathon.
Yeah, so there's this guy, Ben Woosley. He's a core developer. He's a really, really bright guy. And so he was like the one non-shitcoiner that knew how to code. Like it was like Parker Lewis, a couple of my friends were there. And so it was like a good group of people that were there. But developer-wise, there was just only Ben. So we got together and like, well, what could we build? And so we were both thinking about privacy. And so like we both use Wasabi. And I know the freaks are big into the Wasabi. Right?
I'd like to think they are. I hope I don't know.
I hope they are. If Matt,
I hope I don't know.
Depends if they listen to Matt, right?
If you're big into wasabi, I hope I don't know.
So
I'm big into. I've used wasabi pretty heavily.
Wasabi is it's an online version of like this mixing. So like the idea is that certain transactions you can look at them and sort of guess what happened, right? If there's like one input for 1 Bitcoin, right? And a second input for 0.1 and then another one for 0.9. You can kind of guess that someone probably paid 0.1 Bitcoin to someone else and got 0.9 change back. And so one of the ideas here is like, well, let's say instead of that example, let's say you added another input that was like 0.3. So you have 1 and 0.3. Mm-hmm. And then on the outputs, you don't add a new output. You increase one of them. So remember, so
how can you increase an output?
You just give them more money. You add a little to the inside, and you add a little to the outside.
How would you increase it without creating an input with it?
So there already is an input.
Okay.
So like before there was 0.1 and 0.9. Now let's say it's
so you're double spending with the
0.9.
change?
No. So we're adding a new input. So like somebody else is contributing funds to this transaction, and we're giving those funds to one of the pre-existing recipients.
Okay.
And so whereas before it was 1 Bitcoin and then 0.1 and 0.9, now it's 1 Bitcoin and 0.3 Bitcoin, and there's 0.4 and 0.9. What the fuck happened? It's hard to say. Like it's no longer so clear that it was a 0.1 Bitcoin payment. And the way you do this is you have the recipient, the merchant, would be the one who would add this 0.3.
Create the output. So it's P to EP.
So
right?
The recipient, the merchant, would add a little bit on the input side and just take a little more on the output side. Okay. So they net the same, but it all of a sudden becomes very hard to see what the nature of the transaction was.
To know who ended up with what.
Yeah, and so that's the way these
Is this P to EP?
This is called pay join.
Is this like pay to endpoint?
I'm not totally sure what pay to endpoint is, to be honest.
You're not sure P to EP. So P to EP would be enabled with Schnorr signatures, where every transaction would basically be a coin join, where the recipient, like exactly what you described.
Okay, yeah.
So something exactly. What
gotcha.
You described. Yes.
So I'm not super up to speed on the terminology.
This was a Blockstream proposal like 2 years ago, I think.
Definitely heard of it. But the idea here is it's a simple mechanism that doesn't require a lot of behavior change. Like basically all that has to happen is the merchant has to be able to add a little bit to a transaction, and the sender has to still be willing to sign that transaction, even if they would, like the net in their wallet would be the same, the inputs and outputs would be a little different. And this is called a pay join. And so the question was, like, at this hackathon, how can we make some software that people would actually start using this smart thing? Like Waxwing, Adam Gibson is a guy who's written a lot on his, he's one of the creators of Join Market. He's written a lot about this.
Adam, we need to get in the studio.
So one of the questions was like, how do we try to build a, how could we bring these features, how could we make, like, popularize these? And so we try to make this thing called Snowball. Like, the idea is, like, you'd create a SDK, software development kit, on iOS and Android. So basically any mobile phone wallet developer could include this. And at the moment of signing and spending a transaction, they would be able to basically broadcast this transaction to people nearby them and see if they want to add an input and a matching input and output to it. And so one of the logical first person would be the merchant. So it's like, hey, do you want to tack on an input and an output, like, or add equal on each side, just to make it more confusing? And let's say the bag boy wants to also do it, right? Or like, it could quickly get interesting. And so this is like kind of an interesting take on CoinJoin, and it's different from Wasabi in the fact that it's not online, it's local. And so you have a much better guarantee that, like, you know, your peers aren't all Chainalysis. Because online, it's like anybody can participate and you don't really know who it is. And so when it's local, it's like, well, I don't know who it is, maybe. I mean, you could design the UI so you do know. You have to actually check on if you're at a table and you want to do a coin join, you could check everybody. But if you're doing it in more of a willy-nilly manner, it's like, well, I don't know who they are, but they're 300 yards from me. So unless Chainalysis is like, got me on a leash.
And then Adam even had a different proposal too, where you could construct a transaction where you send it out and you say,
Snicker.
hey, yes.
Yeah, Snickers. So this is a problem. This is one of these things where I'd only know if I ran a meetup, because this was on the, like, stuff that BitDevs did. So I'm like, I got to learn this because I'm going to talk about it.
So it's basically you send a transaction. It's like, hey, if one of the necessary inputs of this transaction accepts it and does it, you have a quasi coin join.
Yeah, so you can look for public keys that are that own UTXOs. So that's kind of the first step. You try to find public keys that own UTXOs. And with these, you can say, okay, well, I know their public key. I'm going to try to create a transaction. I'm going to construct a transaction that they would be able to spend, and I'm going to take an input they own and maybe an input I own, and so those are two inputs, and then we're going to spend to two different outputs, and now no one knows which one's mine, which one's theirs. And so the idea is that you could basically, like, post these to a forum or something. He doesn't go into detail, but you could sort of, like, basically somehow send these to that other person.
Present this, somebody be like, hey, you want to coin join right now?
So it'd be like a mailbox, right? Like,
yeah.
you'd have a mailbox, and it's like all these, like, coin join requests. You'd say, yep. And the cool thing is that you don't have to be online running a server. You just need, like, a mailbox so you can check up on every once in a while.
Yeah, and the dependency is, like, whether or not the second person is spent or not yet, right?
Basically, yeah. Well, and the hard part is figuring out what the public keys actually are.
This coin join is possible until that UTXO is spent, right?
Yeah, so the hard part is actually figuring out the public key, because, like, most keys right now are either in multisig or pay-to-pub key hash, and in those, the public key is not visible. But with Schnorr and Taproot, it'll be more, most of it is going to be basically pay-to-pub key, and the default case will be kind of pay-to-pub key. And so you'll know the public key much more readily in that scenario, but you won't necessarily know if it's one person or a bunch of people. But that's fine. It's like you can spam this message out over everyone. You can give everyone, hey, I'll do it with you, and yeah, so it's cool because it's non-interactive.
Well, that's the thing that confused me at first. I thought you'd be like, like for this particular setup, you'd have to know somebody's UTXO and present this coin join to them, where it's sort of passive, right?
Yeah, so you'd need to know that there is a you don't need to know who owns the UTXO. You need to know that there is somebody with XYZ pub key that owns this UTXO, and then you'd need some way, the paper doesn't really go over it, but you need some way to basically broadcast this to everybody such that the owner would be able to discover this.
Which could be like a third party
whatever
website.
The hell you want.
It could be like Craigslist.
It could be whatever you want.
Setup.
Yeah.
You want to come.
Yeah,
coin
I mean
join.
it's a market facilitation type of thing, and so that would be really interesting. So yeah, it's like, this has been one of my experiences. Is like you get deeper into the security, and it's like you're like, oh, well, now you start to have better ideas on the, like, this, I don't know, this location-based coin join, I think, is an interesting idea, and someone should build it. and like it would be cool if like when we got together tonight, we'd be like, let's pour a drink and let's do a coin join. Like just like that would be cool. Like when you go to a conference.
Isn't that what Ricochet is for though? Like isn't that what Samurai's working on? Isn't that what they want to do?
I haven't actually used Ricochet.
I haven't either.
Yeah,
I don't have an Android. That's
yeah,
why.
so I gotta look into Samurai's stack a little more, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff on the privacy front, and I feel like it's not terribly explored. And I mean, the other tough thing about privacy is that on the one hand, it seems like there isn't a big market for it, but like I think Wasabi did like something like $80 million in transactions, so they only get like 0.01% of those, because it's like I think their model is like 3 zeros and then a 3 per anonymity set, basically per person that participates in your coin join. So they actually have a business, which is cool. When I got into Bitcoin, I didn't expect that there would be a business for providing privacy to people, and it sounds like Wasabi's actually able to make it work. And to me that's like quite inspiring. Like as an independent developer, like I think about these, like there's one route where it's like, you go run to San Francisco and try to get a bunch of funding. And then you end up, doing shitcoins and all kinds of stuff. And then there's another route that's more like a cold card or a Wasabi wallet. And it's like somehow these guys manage to create a business model that works and is only Bitcoin and provides like real security or privacy services to the thing that really matters. And like those are pretty inspiring business models to me. I'd love to find a way to like find something like that,
They're incredibly inspiring. I think you'd have to lose your name and your face and your everything, right? Like they're taking on an extreme amount of risk, right, from a regulatory perspective. But actually, no. Like I
think Wasabi might be, but I don't think a cold card.
That's what I was gonna say. Wasabi, like Nopara, love them. Like love you, Nopara. You're putting your neck out there though, and it's right. Like
I really admire it.
Yeah.
To be honest.
No, I do as well, and it's beautiful to see the passion that like comes out, right?
Yeah.
Like, why are people like? We shouldn't need to feel passion to support these people. These should be inalienable rights.
Well, it gets
inalienable rights. Inalienable.
It gets into like what motivates these people to do it. It's like when I look at myself, it's like it would be much smarter for me to go work at U.S. Bank or something, or like Google, and like
I can't imagine you as a
stack
bank
sats, right? And stack sats, but I can't. I cannot do it. Like there's something. Yeah, it's like
what part of like, and I agree. I am the same person. Like I cannot do it either. What is it of us? Is it our need to feel important, or is it a sincere drive towards something that is sincere? Do you think we are just assholes that like, hey, I need attention. I want to be the guy that fucking owns.
Probably
this
part
world.
of it. Yeah, I think a lot of it for me is just like this will to sort of like independence and self-determination, right? Like that's. I think that's what draws me to Bitcoin. It's like I want to be my own man, and I want to like be the captain of my own fate. And
could you not do that in the incumbent system?
I think I can, but I think that the Bitcoin financial world would make that a lot easier for everyone, and that's more appealing. Like a world where it's like it's more dependent on like producing value, because value can be stored, rather than sort of like
bullshitting value.
Yeah, whatever it is now. It's like I just think that would be a better world where people could really like determine their own fate a little more. So I think that's what attracts me to it.
Yeah, me too. Like I feel. And again, like, that's why I had to posit, like, are we just assholes? Like, I just feel like a lot of the world is, like, wandering aimlessly. Like, what the fuck are we doing? Just, like, I don't know. We're drunk now. We officially finished the bottle of,
So let me continue
Angel's
giving
Envy.
Let me continue giving the pitch on Junction, which we've sort of been dropping hints in.
So let's give the full Junction pitch.
Yeah. So the idea is like it's a desktop app for working with for using hardware wallets, and The hardware wallets are in charge of the private keys, which is what they're good at. But they don't know anything about the blockchain. They don't know anything about what your balances are, what transactions you control, or how to create a transaction, what they're allowed to spend, what they're not allowed to spend. That's what Bitcoin Core is really good at. That's what Bitcoin Core does, watches the blockchain. It can also do private keys, but it's not actually, it's probably not the right tool for that. So that's the idea of Junction, is it's a desktop app that could help you connect these two. So you could create you could use single sig with one hardware wallet and use Bitcoin Core to monitor the blockchain. That can be running in your nodal or your Casa node. I don't know if it'll actually work with these when eventually, but like something like that in the corner of your house, that will keep track of your balances, but actually the ability to spend the balances will be on these private keys, which you can, if you have one, you can store it in a safe. If you have 3, you can store one with an attorney, one with a safe deposit box, one at home. If you have 5, you get more and more dials to sort of configure it for yourself. And so that's the idea with Junction is it would be really easy to set up a single sig or especially a multi-sig setup that where you actually have control over consensus. Like this is a problem with most. Like by default, Electrum outsources consensus to other people. Some of these like collaborative custody models where you have a group help you, like provide some software for you to set up a multi-sig and they hold onto one of your keys. Generally, those are all, you outsource consensus to them. And like even the Casa node is actually just for Lightning. It's not for a consensus for your multi-sig. And so the idea here is like, I want consensus where it fucking matters on my multi-sig. So yeah, that's the idea is like, set up a multi-sig with your node and that's it. So.
And I think what you're like teasing at right now too is like the intricacy of the software and how to interact with it. Like you can set it up where it's leveled and securitized in a way.
Yeah.
Where it gives you better peace of mind at the end of the day, right?
Exactly. Like that's the whole point of multi-sig. It just, to me, it makes it, like the chances that you lose your key on single sig are very low. Like less than 1% probably or something for most people. But it's like there's a chance, it's like you always in the back of your mind know that one thing can wipe you out. And so it's like let's say you have a price run up. The whole price run up in the back of your mind is going to be like, man, I hope when I go to spend this, I'm safe. It like ruins that whole thing for you. And if you have some more redundancy, I would have to really fuck up. Like if I fuck up twice in this thing and lose 2 keys, like I would almost deserve to lose my coins, right? Like that's the situation you want. You want where so much would have to go wrong that you'd have trouble believing it. Like that's where you want to find yourself in, and then you can, then you're a lot more relaxed.
So what did I see when you're given the visual demo of the 2 hardware wallets connected to each other?
So when you create a wallet in Junction, you have to, the idea is that a wallet is a set of signers. It's just like basically public keys that will be able to sign for transactions. And so you register these by you plug in your cold card and that guy says, hey, I'll be a signer. And this is eventually how Bitcoin Core will work. Shore's Provost has a very work in progress thing that will probably go in 2 years. It's you add signers, right? Like your Trezor, your Ledger, and you kind of plug these ones in, unlock them, and they will basically contribute a public key. Once you have let's say 3 public keys and 2 of 3 master public keys, these are these public key factories. Then you can go and use each of these public key factories in separately to create their first child, for example, and use those first children to create a multi-sig receiving address. And so the key thing is in this ceremony to set up the wallet, you really want each one of these hardware wallets to know the identities of the other participants. And the big problem is right now only the cold card can do this. Only the cold card has the ability to upload, say, hey, I'm in a multi-sig setup. These are the 3 devices. These were the derivation paths, and these were the public keys that were created at that derivation path that are these public key factories. And if you know those, then given any address that was that should be spendable by this wallet, the hardware wallet, the cold card, the Trezor, the ledger, should be able to actually validate that will be spendable. They can say, hey, I can derive that private key, and I will be able to spend this. And that's really important. And so the main job of a tool like Junction is to sort of facilitate this initial ceremony to make sure that each device can sort of commit to the participants in this sort of like a contract, this like multi-sig party. And it's a problem because right now only the cold card actually implements this ability. And the ledger, I don't think, can really check anything. And the Trezor can check that it is one of the keys, right? So for a 3 or 5, you can say, I'm one of these keys. But the other, like you'd actually have to go to every one of these to check, if you were doing a like 3 or 5 with Trezors, you would need to go and actually visit the location of each one of the 5, and that's a nightmare.
And so on the cold card, once you initiate this multi-sig at inception, each device has an ID basically associated with that the cold card can confirm the other IDs of the other devices. The other devices cannot confirm
Basically,
their own IDs, let alone other.
Sort of
IDs.
you have like an ID that's sort of like an identifier of which key it came from, and then also this public key that is used to create these child public keys, which go into addresses. And the cold card is the only one that can really verify that. So like, Junction will take this point of view, like, maybe your cold card should be the one that you have at home, because that you can use to validate receiving addresses. And I don't know, maybe it could like, it's still early, like it's just getting to the point now where I think by the time this is posted, I'll have Linux and Windows binaries that you can go double click on and run. And like, it's at the point now where you can set up this wallet, you can register signers. It works for Trezor Ledger Cold Card. Bitbox and KeepKey should be supportable very quickly. BitBoy and Crypto Advanced Spectre will both be supported, so it'll be able to do like QR code air gaps. These hobbyist wallets will be supported. And so so it supports 3 now. It can set up a native SegWit or a wrapped SegWit, meaning like SegWit, so you get the discount, but wrapped is meaning you get a legacy address, so that if the people paying you have...
It's got a 3 in the front.
Yeah, it's got a 3 in the front instead of a BC.
BC.
So people with shitty old wallets, or even like BitMax, can spend to that, right? So that's the value there.
Let's tisk on BitMax right now.
Huh?
Let's tisk on BitMax right now.
Yeah, I mean, what's going on?
I've heard that.
I mean, this is the tough thing though. Like what is the business case for them to do that? Like, if people are using their platform, they're either so drowning in money, they're either making so much money they don't care about the discount of SegWit, or they're losing so much money they don't care about the discount of SegWit. It's tough because so this is a big problem I have with myself. It's like I'm thinking about all these like super advanced signing ceremonies for multi-sig and like what can validate what, and then the big exchanges don't even use SegWit. Like, am I on cloud 9, just completely oblivious to the real world?
So for those of you who don't know, the particular pain point at which we're coming at BitMEX right now is the fact that the way I understand it, they use the same receiving address for all accounts. So if you are able to trade on BitMEX and you're going to send Bitcoin to BitMEX, you have the same address for your account that you send Bitcoin to in perpetuity. So if you've been on the exchange for 2 years, you've been sending Bitcoin to it for 2 years, you've been sending to the same address. But I don't even care about BitMEX in particular. I want to go back more to the conversation we were having earlier. Like, does this all get abstracted for us at some point? Like, do we even have to worry about like unique address creation and interacting with other wallets and shit like that? Like, is this all early stage pain points that will be overcome in your mind? Like, will all this UX be abstracted over?
I think you can trade the difficulty of verifying for trust. Like, you can have somebody you can trust somebody to take care of it for you. Like, if you go to some company that helps you set up a multi-sig, that's basically what you're doing. You're outsourcing a like threat model to them. Like, you figure out what's a threat, what isn't. You're going to outsource that to them, and so you trust them. And I think that's the way it works. Like, if you really want to know for sure, or if you want to maximize the chances that a given set of funds are safe, somebody's got to really pay attention to that, and then other people are going to trust that person, and that's rational, because not everyone is going to be a security expert, and some people are more talented at this than others, and like that's the beauty of like specialization of labor. But someone's got to do it, and then you don't want that person to be trusted too much, right? Like you don't want that person or that group of people to have 10% of the coins or 5% of the coins. Like you'd like them to, these trusted people to have smaller chunks. But I think always like you're never going to get like really good. You're never going to exercise the benefits of Bitcoin. Like this trust minimized, I shouldn't say trustless, trust minimized value transfer without understanding
Zabo's not
how it
happy
works.
about trustless. Zabo's not happy about trustless.
Yeah, so trust minimized. Like you're not going to get this without understanding how it works, because it's like in order to actually like go down the list and say, yeah, I'm not trusting them, you have to know what's going on. So I think like this can be. I mean, I'm a big. I think that a lot of this stuff will work. I think there will be a lot of like custodial successful stuff in the future. Like, Visas and MasterCards running on Bitcoin and all that. I think there will be a lot of custodial things.
It's blasphemous, motherfucker.
I think they'll lose their privileged position as a, there will be competitors to them, and so they won't be as much of a monopoly as they are now.
I agree.
Yeah. So, but for a lot of people, it's like. Yeah, you don't need trust minimized. You want the trust minimization for like really large transfers, for stuff like validation of money supply, to know that you actually, that what you have now, the percentage you have now is going to be, you want to be able to predict what percentage of the total supply you're going to own in like 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Like that's really the important thing when you're thinking about like Bitcoin, is like, do I believe that like if I buy one Bitcoin that I will own 1/21 millionth of the supply in 30 years, roughly,
yeah.
Right? Yeah. So like this is one of like the kind of it's like, do you have to trust somebody for that to happen, or is this like a natural game of incentives?
And once
you
we
can't
get over
answer that question without learning.
No, you can't. But what is the threshold for learning at which it becomes a known fact that you can have confidence in the system? That's what I'm curious about now. Like, is there a threshold? Will there ever be a threshold? Will there always be, not doubting, but questioning of the security and efficacy of the system?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Like in the early days, like the first people to really adopt it were cryptographers, because like they didn't have to outsource the trust in somebody. They could actually verify themselves, right? And so like maybe a hard money guy, a sound money guy would be interested, but they wouldn't be able to do the due diligence that it actually works. But the cryptographer was able. And so, after that, like these people, like Greg Maxwell's of the world became, it's like they sort of became established. And then like somebody who comes at it from more of like safety and perspective, it's like he can sort of outsource that to them. And be like, if they say it works, I'll believe them, and I'm not going to have to do all that research. And so it sort of like begs the question of, like what, like the people who are coming in now, it's like, it's been clear for a while now that there are like technical experts who like vouch for the fact that the system works as expected. But like, I guess the question now is like whether that is worth something. And that's like the thing that the current people are betting on. And yeah, so like I think now it's like you can kind of say that it works. I guess one of the big questions is whether something would work better, right? Like that's always the thing that comes up in conversations is like, well, could you swap out some feature of Bitcoin and make it more private or something?
Well, and I guess the biggest question you have to answer that question is how much of an improvement is Bitcoin to the incumbent system, right? Like we're talking orders of magnitude of an improvement over the incumbent system. What is better compared to that?
Well, it's different things to different people. And we were talking about this earlier. It's like, well, we're talking about kind of how Bitcoin could fail. And like, there's like two really big value propositions I think Bitcoin has to people. Like one, it's like this scarcity, right? It's like harder. You have a better guarantee than gold that your slice of the pie is getting no smaller.
It's finite.
Yeah, that like you have a lower bound on the slice, the size of your slice in the pie, and that's what a certain class of people are really interested in. And then there's another thing. It's where like, well, I want to make a transaction. No one can stop this transaction. Or I want to make a transaction, or I made this transaction, and no one knows I made this transaction. That's another value proposition. Bitcoin, these are sort of like unrelated. Like people speculate as to which one Satoshi really valued and which one he used as like the sort of
prototype or.
Well, it's sort of like the implant mechanism, the mechanism of like implanting this idea in people. And I guess the thing I sort of worry about is we'll get the scarcity. We'll get the scarcity, but we won't get the censorship resistance, or like it's like you'll get the Austrian side of Bitcoin, but you won't get the cypherpunk side.
This is exactly where I wanted to end it, because what you started it with before we hit record, like that's what you're worried about. Like, let's walk through this. So, pause the question again. What happens if we get the Austrian Garden of Eden, but that comes at the cost of our privacy being completely bastardized?
Yeah.
Like, how do you get the Austrian and the cypherpunk dream all in one?
Yeah, so I don't want to scaremonger here. I don't want to say I'm like terrified of it, but it's like when you think about like what would you be concerned about? Like, this is the thing I get concerned about. I get concerned of a scenario where I would characterize it as like a big win. It's like scarcity held, the supply cap held, like a fee market developed, all these great things, but like somehow, and like, the ability of governments to rule over us was diminished because they couldn't collect taxes and print money as easily. And so all these great things happened, but like everything is still out in the open. We sort of like collectively chose to ossify the protocol quickly. And and it's like this digital gold dream, but sort of like everything you do is public knowledge, and not so much states have a control over you with this manner, but like, for-profit entities.
Well, capital, self-censorship.
Yeah. I mean, like it fits into surveillance capitalism, future of the world. So that's one of the things that I am like. I don't want to say I'm worried about it, but it's like if you ask me, how could Bitcoin fail? Like that's one of the things I think of. Is like, well, it would be a great success. We'd all be happy. Like the people who are entered into it now, we'd all be like deliriously happy. But like, that's not what we want. That's not what we set out to do.
I don't know if I'd be deliriously happy with that. Like, I want both. I know,
but like, I can just knowing people. It's like, if the investment games came by it, we'd all change. Like that's the thing I sort of fear. Like,
no, I agree. Like, at a point, like when you're set, like why disrupt the status quo?
You get spoiled. So that's the way. So I guess I want to like I had this tweet a while ago that people didn't really like it, but I thought it was just like it's like Bitcoin. It's like maybe Bitcoin can't fail, but it's one of these ideas like maybe Bitcoin can't fail, but only if none of us believe it. It's one of those ideas where it's like maybe it's true that Bitcoin can't fail, but only if none of us believe it. Like if we believe that and if we get complacent, it's probably it might not be true. Like so Peter Thiel gave an example.
Like only an idea, like us feigning it being alive would keep it alive. So there's this
great. I got this idea from Peter Thiel. He had somebody who he worked with who was like he's saying the graduation ceremony at Yale. Basically, they were saying like, hey, you have your whole life set for you. Like, this was not the graduation, like the freshman introduction thing. And they're like, hey, you're set for life. Like you've succeeded. You're set for life. Like, congrats. That's what they said to the freshmen. It's like, maybe that's one of the things that's true only if none of the freshmen believe that. Because if they believe that, it'll corrupt them, right? And so I think a similar thing is maybe true of Bitcoin, where it's like, hey, maybe it's true that it will succeed, but like we can't assume. You can't assume
your
it'll
head
succeed.
on a swivel. You need to assume the worst.
Exactly.
I don't want to end it here. I'm gonna pee. I'll be right back. We're not ending it. I'm gonna pee. We're at 1:53:53.
When Marty, one of the things I've learned is that when Marty starts talking into the mics, saying timestamps, this is the moment that he always forgets happened. So yeah, just in case this makes it in the interview.
Get an ad lib now? All right, so I guess it's my chance to give an ad lib now. We're an hour and 55 minutes and 55 seconds into this podcast. I had to rip a big pee. And we're back. Pretty sure my wife hates me. You can hear everything. All right, so from 153.53 to 157.18. What do you want to finish it on? We just ripped it back from a piss break. We're almost 2 hours in.
Yeah, and in 3 hours, I got a flight to Copenhagen.
Like, do you want to get to the airport?
3.5 hours. I got plenty of time.
Let's get back into the story of Justin Moon. How's your year been? You've had, it seems.
Yeah, so I was talking about this earlier. It's like surviving in the Bitcoin economy, right? Like, I don't think we talked about this on the show yet. It's like, I've always had jobs, right? And you have a boss and you have an employer, and it's like this big hierarchical structured thing, and like your life is sort of arranged for you, and you eat out of a trough basically, and it's great. And so when I got into Bitcoin, it's like I was like, I'm going to start this class, right? And like, I didn't think anybody would sign up. I started it for free, and people started signing up, and it's like pretty soon I had all these like individuals who were paying me to provide the service to them. And I never like actually had that with like individual people, where it's like I'm accountable to people. It's kind of like Galt's Gulch or whatever. It's like you have these like, they're making your tires. You're gonna tell them if you don't like the tires. They're gonna like try to give you the best tire they can deliver. It's like it's great to like. There's a certain feeling of aliveness when you have this way of making a living. You like make individual people happy rather than like fit into some industrial nation state apparatus and really do shit all with your life. You can make a great living that way, but like you don't ever serve individuals. And so that's been like the story of my last year, is like finding ways to serve individuals. For the beginning, it was these classes. And more recently, it's been starting to like, more consulting and stuff. And, hopefully I can find a way to either continue the education or find a way to help people use Bitcoin more easily. But yeah, that's been like the really interesting thing is like, it's like an eat what you want. Like I was saying earlier, it's like an eat what you kill world. It's like, you have to,
I'm so happy we got that quote on here.
yeah, it's like an eat what you kill. It's like, you're not fed, you have to go get it. And there's like, you feel more alive when you live that life. And that's been sort of my experience of 1 year in the Bitcoin economy. And there's been some ups and some downs. I mean, I've certainly lost a little hair along the way.
You're looking good, dude.
I'm looking good, but it's like stressful when you're like, you're doing all this shit and, you're not really, like, I feel like I'm finally qualified to teach. I've been teaching a class for a year. And I'm finally now qualified to teach the class.
What would you say to all those out there who are a bit apprehensive to lurk out of the shadows, to put their voice out there, to put their voice forward about what they think about Bitcoin? Like, you are somebody I respect very highly in the Bitcoin space. And the fact that you're trying to teach others, and I think the humility of realizing that, oh my God, I need to teach myself on this journey to teach others is something that everybody needs to hear. So like, how do you overcome that maybe embarrassment of, oh my God, I'm supposed to be teaching these motherfuckers. I don't even know this right now. Like,
yeah, I mean, there's not a good answer to that. Like, I can think of a few times I did a meetup, like, I'll just say this. The first time, like, Jimmy's song came to my meetup, I was like, oh, this is great, and like, I tried to give a talk and I fucked it up big time. I was like, oh, that was disappointing. Jimmy's sitting front row and I fuck it up big time. And it's like, you just, I can think of a few more, but like fuck ups, right? You just keep going.
Eat the L's.
You just eat it, yeah. You just eat it and you bleed a little bit and it's like, I'll keep going. So it's like, yeah, I think that's the way it is.
Do you think that has anything to do with your disagreeableness? That you're like, fuck, like I gotta prove everybody that.
Probably has quite a lot to do with it, to be honest.
What do you mean in that way?
Maybe like the.
What does it mean to be disagreeable? Because I feel like I don't disagree with you on many things.
So I think it's about which external opinions you'll put value in. So I think there's a lot of people whose opinions I don't care about at all, and so yeah, you just don't care. You don't like that. That's not valuable to you, and you like put value into the few people that you maybe.
That doesn't go into your input-output system. That's
yeah, so it's like the opposite of politeness, I guess. Like
yeah.
Like politeness is like you try to take take into consideration the opinions of everybody, and be more disagreeable is like
indifference. Would it be disagreeableness or indifference more?
I think both.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's the, I don't know, that's the, like, so I'm in a weird position because it's like my interest in Bitcoin is almost purely from like a hodler, like store of value, like hard money point of view. But it's like, I've made a living, so that's one point of view. And then there's the other point of view, like that's safety, right? And the other side is like Serge Cartier or whatever his name is. Or how do you pronounce his name? Like brilliant, I think he's CEO of BitRefill. And so he has this...
CEO of Beaver.
Yeah.
Serge, yeah.
Yeah, so he has this great point of view where it's like, well, no, we don't just want store of value, we need to build the circular economy, right? And he's very articulate on that point of view, just like Safe is with the store of value. And so it's like I come at it from Safe's point of view more, but like my wife, actually living it out, has been more on the Surge point of view. It's like I'm the recipient of people who are participating in the circular Bitcoin economy. They're willing to pay me, oftentimes in Bitcoin, to help them defend themselves in this world, in this Bitcoin world, and so that's been an interesting experience.
And I'm very happy that you brought the dichotomy of Surge and Safe in particular, and the dichotomy of using Bitcoin as a medium of exchange and as a store of value in particular, because as somebody who's using it for both cases right now, like it works for both. Like,
yeah.
And this is something I tweeted out earlier today. That's all you. Finish it. The 87% of all the transactions we've ever accepted on TFTC.io have been Lightning Network transactions.
Yeah.
Thousands and thousands. Like 87%
That's
are
cool.
Lightning transactions from the Lightning Network. They make up total 9% of the value we've accepted. So Another way you could put it is
It's
13.
funny. It's 90-10. Yeah.
Yeah, so the other way you could put it is 13% of the transactions we accepted have been on-chain,
Yeah.
but they've accounted for 91% of the value.
Yeah.
But you can see, just in that use case in particular with our website, the interaction with our website in particular, less people are able to donate money on-chain to us, or less likely to move UTXOs on-chain to us. But when they do, they'll invest a lot, and then counter that, you have more people able to spend 10 cents with us every day.
One of the fascinating things about Lightning versus other cryptocurrencies is that the people who use it have actually no natural financial incentive to use it. Like an Ethereum person is like, pump my coin, like I'm using DeFi. I'm like, but like I don't think Ethereum's really like people Lightning, let's say, like it's like the people who are using Lightning aren't using it to like pump the price of Bitcoin. I don't think like that doesn't go into
generally trying to create new experiences on the internet.
Yeah, it's like this is one of the differentiators about Bitcoin versus like everything else in the scene. It's like these people are sort of just doing it out of just like innate love for and almost
quote unquote innovation,
almost gratitude for the change that Bitcoin brought to their life. And they're like, I look at it as gratitude. It's like they're like, I am so grateful for what Bitcoin has done to me. I'm gonna like sort of like participate in this thing called Lightning. I don't make anything from it. Like I don't gain from it. And that's one of the I think that's one of the things that's really fascinating about Lightning.
That's the intention I went into it with.
That's what I went to it with.
We've actually gained stuff.
Like,
even though like it's 87% of the total amount of transactions that we received, but only 9% of the value. Mm-hmm. That 9% is still value that we would have not have otherwise had, and the overhead for making that the overhead for making that value acceptable is minimal. Yeah,
I mean that's one of the other the thing that's interesting to me about I'm always on the fence about Lightning because it's like on the one hand I feel like it doesn't solve a problem I have or a problem that exists. Like the problem it solves is fee pressure, and that problem doesn't exist yet. So it's like, well, do I get excited about that? It doesn't solve a problem that exists in my point of view, but it solves a problem that will exist if the future plays out like I expect it to.
Well, it depends on where the fee pressure is coming from, right? Like as a transactor, like I want as low fee pressure as possible, but as somebody who's as a
hodler, you want a little bit better.
Yes, as a hodler, you want more. As a miner, you want more because you want more assurances that it'll be secure over time. But if we're able to, so with Lightning in particular and fees in particular, I believe that Lightning will lead to a Jevons paradox, right? Where the utility of the Lightning Network leads to underlying demand of the need to open channels, which leads to higher fees.
Yeah.
Do you follow?
No, it's like, I was just reading this like interesting, I was like trying to catch up on Taproot. This is like, I'm going to go off a little bit, but come back.
Go off.
And so it's like, Peter Wula had this like interesting kind of way of describing like a blockchain system. It's like sort of like this perfect court where it's like, I think he called it the court model or something, where it's like it would always rule fairly, based on what it was. And that's sort of like the way he described the blockchain. And so the point is that it's not so much important that everybody has the ability to go to court, because most people don't go to court, like in a legal situation. But the ability to go to court, like the threat of a court appearance, makes it so most people settle.
Can dictate certain actions.
Yeah, and so like in the Taproot case, it's like there'd be like this sort of like cooperative case where most people agree, and then like the other cases.
The arbitration.
There's like the backups wouldn't ever have to be displayed to the chain because you'd always have the option of falling back on those. So it's like this ability. It's like the presence of a plan B makes it so like plan A is sort of more lethal. And so I think that's a lot of the way like I view Lightning is it's like I tend to think more custodial things will become really popular, that a lot of people do that. But like I think that like the presence of like a Lightning, like if any of the custodians ever sort of like start like this is for like paying for restaurant, like paying for your McDonald's, like this is not a really important transaction. Yeah, this is not like a really important thing. This is just like buying food, right? For that level of transaction, I think there will be probably like trusted third parties, and I wouldn't care one bit if a trusted third party knew where I ate or what plane I flew on most of the time, right? But the thing is that the presence of a Lightning network is like this court. It's like, hey, I will go to court if you abuse me. And Lightning is there, and I got a node, and like, and so I mean, maybe
So
I
I'm
would
a
maybe
juror in this court.
yeah, maybe someone like me would use it all the time, but like I think the presence of this court, like Lightning, that anybody can access is going to make it so the custodians behave better.
It's a check and balance, basically.
Basically, yeah, that's the way I view it.
It's a leverage card.
Yeah.
Fuck, dude. We need to do this more often.
I gotta come out here more. I mean, I love New York. Like every once in a while. I mean, until like I love it until you guys tell me what rent you pay. I always ask, and I'm like, ooh, ooh. I could buy a castle for that in Austin, man.
It's not fun, dude.
Yeah.
It's not fun. Fuck, dude. No, I love sitting down with you. And again, we sat down, 3-4 weeks ago?
Yeah, that was fun.
It was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun.
And I think you approach this different than anybody. I'm so happy that...
that's good. That's interesting to hear.
No, I do.
I know you never know how original. You never know if your ideas are.
You're a perfect example of something like everybody likes to talk. Like, oh, I didn't know how it worked until I actually got down. Like you created a BitBoy. Like you're creating this desktop software that verifies that your address is part of the 3 of 5 multisig. Like you were actually getting your fucking feet dirty. You're getting your hands dirty.
Yeah, trying.
You're getting into it.
So this is the thing. I think multisig is the biggest. Like, okay, so
here we go.
I'm embarrassing myself here. I think Bitcoin multisig is the biggest problem that exists on the planet. Like, I think it is. I think the ability to store bitcoins in a multisig is like so much more important than global warming, than wars, than like anything else. So it's like I'm absolutely compelled to work on this problem. And my question is like how to work on it. Like I've been working on by myself. Now I'm starting to work with some companies. It's like I don't know, just making I'm learning to meet some of these protocol developers. Like that's the big thing in the last month of my life is I've learned to use IRC. So I can actually go and like talk to these core devs now.
They're like, oh dude, where you been, man?
So I had a thing with my like Junction where I wanted a certain feature and like I complained about it on Stack Overflow and Peter Willa answered, it's like, yeah, this could be implemented in the descriptor language. And it's like, I had no way to like hit on a door and be like, do it.
Peter, what is the descriptor language?
And so finally, like Shores Provost, this other core contributor, like basically made the stink that I didn't know how to make, and he got it implemented by Andrew Chow. And it's like kind of like learning how to navigate this landscape where it's like, hey, I have some features I want. How do you get that? How do you make that happen?
Centralization.
I mean, it's governance. No, it's governance. It's like it's interesting. Like these first few, like the last couple of months, I've been participating in governance a little bit, and I mean, yeah, it's like it's interesting. Like it's very human. Like the way these sort of like new changes go into Bitcoin is like a message is sent from one person to another, and it's like something that the recipient says that's a good idea, and I'm going to try to do it, and it's like it sort of like has to pass a series of gates, right? Like. When I'm talking about the sorted multi-descriptor, like this is very detailed, and so it's like interesting. Like this, someone tells Andrew Chow to do it. Like I made us think about it. No one here heard, and then and so it sort of like goes by, and then like it becomes a pull request on GitHub, and like all the main people have to check off on it, and anybody saying no could stop it, and so it's sort of interesting to see how it sort of happens. Like these. I don't really have a point here, but it's like interesting to watch. To me, the interesting thing is how human it is. Like it's actually individuals working together, and then individuals reviewing. Like it's a very individual. Like the interactions are one-to-one versus like sort of like a board. It's very different from like a boardroom. Like this is one of the really interesting things. It's like sort of nothing really. And Bitcoin is like very different from a boardroom. Like the way governance happens, like it's often it's between individual people. Who
you have the shareholders basically being able to confirm what the boardroom wants to instill, right?
Sure.
The shareholders being the full nodes.
But the way the code is updated is like oftentimes very much like one-to-one like developers like making comments back and forth. It's like a very important pull request, and it's like it's like Matt Corallo and John Newberry going back and forth, and it's like you read through it and it's like these two going at it, and that sort of like is the distillation of the entire governance process. Is like these two individuals get nominated to like to lock horns a little bit.
Did they even get nominated, or did they just step up to lock horns? Right?
So like the same. Those are the same thing in my view.
What do you mean?
Like
you can self-nominate? Like how come Justin Moon kind of
in a system? Yeah, I mean, I think you can self-nominate. Like the most in a system based on like production. It's like in a system where people are free to produce, like the most productive participants will be extremely obvious. Like if everyone is free to participate on equal grounds, like you'll have a few people that sort of rise to the top, and those
so people just naturally step back and like, hey,
sure. I mean,
this
like,
is obvious.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to protocol development, it's such a narrow skill. It's like you need to learn. Like if you know how much Matt Corallo knows about how Linux does networking, like you would like barf. Like he knows so much, you would barf. Like these people, how much Peter Woola knows about bit manipulation and like algebra or something. Like it's just amazing. And so it's like a highly specialized skill, and it's not something that everyone should learn. Like it's
not something that not only should everybody not have to learn, but like it would be ridiculous to even attempt to believe that everybody could learn this.
Yeah, it's a highly, highly specialized skill, and so I do think it's a process where like it's sort of like it's cool. It's like out of all of the hodlers, it's like you get this like sort of sublimation of like 30 people who somehow have this like really weird skill set, and like I'm on the edge. Like I could be a shitty one of those. I don't think I could be a good one of those. So I sort of choose to like stay on the application side. And so I can kind of see into it a little bit. And it's like really, I think it's really it's amazing that this sort of order, like when you meet the core developers, I
feel like you can name the 20 off my head right now.
Let me finish. When you meet these core developers, like they're just like really impressive. And it's interesting, like having worked at startups and companies and stuff, it's like when you meet the people at the top, they're often not impressive. And I mean, like, I don't want to like oversell the core developers. Like there's flaws too, but like they're very impressive.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
They're very expert people.
You're talking about your prototypical startup founder who
it's like you meet this guy and he's a snake.
Externalities to yes. Exactly.
Yeah, he's a snake. And so I think it's cool that like that's been a thing. I don't like to like maybe use the word bullish, but it's like been like kind of a bullish thing where it's like the deeper I get into the development community. Like I remember at the Breaking Bitcoin, I was like standing with a group of people who were really sophisticated, and it's like I was listening to this conversation, and it's like, man, it's just like really like these guys are taking this really seriously, and they're really thinking through what they're doing. And I think like when I have these interactions, I'm like, okay, this is the right place to be.
Well, and any of you freaks have been listening to Tales from the Crypt for the last 2 years will know that Matt Corallo was one of our first repeating guests, and he came on in October of 2017 and said Bitcoin has a 5% chance of succeeding. Mm-hmm. And Peter Woola is another dev like this. Like right now, like I saw him getting into it with Neil Woodfine on Twitter about like...
Yeah, this is an interesting point. I mean...
Right, so the interesting debates, like... Is Bitcoin more social and economics than it is technical, right?
Yeah.
And that is the question.
I mean, that's one of the questions is like, I don't want to judge anybody here. I'll just like say the
No, you're not
question.
judging anybody.
It's like the question is like, do the core developers of Bitcoin, the people who are like the masters of the technology, like understand why it works? I think fundamentally that's what it is. And so it's like someone who comes from an economic point of view would say, I mean, it's like the... and again,
I'll come out and say what you're trying to say. Like I've come out and say like, yes, so as somebody who has come from finance, jumped into tech in the most surface level, cursory way possible, like looking at Bitcoin, what is more important, the social aspect of it or the tech aspect of it? It's hard to say, because the tech aspect of it is sort of piecemeal technologies over time that have worked, and it's just a perfect combination of these technologies. And then the social aspect is something that I think may be way heavier. But what is the lowest barrier of technical capabilities that you need to have the system persist into perpetuity? That is the question.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I think it's reflected by the fact that many people get interested in Bitcoin and then their interest persists for like a different reason. It's like came for the blank, stayed for the blank. I think it sort of reflects that as like the, in a sense, these like developers like came for some reason, probably like some sort of intellectual curiosity or something else, and maybe they stayed for a different reason. And you also see this by the people who left Bitcoin, like the Vitalik Buterin's of the world, right? Like he was like a great magazine writer,
incredible writer,
incredible writer.
Technical writer. Like
yeah,
he could describe.
He's like Aaron Van Weerdem, like before that, I think. Like I wasn't around back. I'm class of 2018, so I don't know. But yeah, so it's like a large class of these people left, and I mean that's a big. Yeah, I think Nick Carter had a good tweet recently where he's like, people think of like, for example, the quote we started with earlier would sort of describe a Bitcoin developer, a core developer, as like an idealist, right? Like somebody who has these convictions that don't necessarily align with the real world, but which are sort of like utopian in some sense. And Nick Carter had this great point where he's like, no, these people are like techno realists. Like they are very in touch with all the things that can and will go wrong. And that's definitely my experience. It's like every time I try to like push something like, hey, I want to do this on the application side, it's like, you're going to get wrecked in XYZ directions. And it's like, fuck. But that's very much my opinion or my experience with them, is they're realists.
Well, this goes back to the sovereign individual.
The ones that are left.
The sovereign individual thesis is such that we are going to transition into an age where there's so much information, there's so much noise and signal and fake news and literally information, literally bits and bytes to take in for each individual, that it is going to be hard for each individual to discern on themselves, let alone the collective to discern on itself. And that's what that book really preaches, is being able to discern for yourself what is happening, and sort of not a reclusion to the self, but a confirmation in the self, and like, hey, these are first principle beliefs that I have, and I'm going to move outward from here. Like I can describe the world from these first principle beliefs, and it gets crazy, man, once it all opens up to everything, and you have like the Babel situation that we're talking about earlier. Like that is very possible in this internet connected age where people can get very confused. But I also think that's the beauty of it. People can either get very confused, or you can have a very concise.
That's why a standard of value is important, right?
Right.
It's like
exactly.
A standard of value is the thing that like jumps the Babel problem. When everyone has a way of like
bartering.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Of sort of squaring their transactions and squaring their financial interests. That's really important.
Is this the basis for what we do as humans? Like,
I think so. I mean, I think there's definitely a case to be made that like so I gave this talk at, this is going to be my new passion project, is I'm going to go to shitcoin events and give maximalist speeches. I really like, if any of you freaks run a shitcoin event, please invite me. So I went to this, it was like a Texas blockchain conference or something. It was run by the University of Texas. And so it was a blockchain conference, so I gave the talk like, what, Bitcoin, the only blockchain that matters. And I walked through like a couple points about it, like, it's like there's two big ones, is like, because everyone's pitching these like, put corn on the blockchain and stuff. And it's like there's two big problems. Like one is like, it's really hard to get information into a blockchain, because you have to if you get information in, you trust who gave it to you, and you lose the trustless property, right?
How do you enforce what a computer says in the physical world?
And that's the other problem, is enforcement. So it's the Oracle problem and the enforcement problem. Like enforcement is like, I got a blockchain. Marty, I got a blockchain. It says I own all of New York.
It says you don't own any of this land
Could you
anymore.
please vacate? Like, I got a blockchain that says I own this place. No, it doesn't matter because it's not enforceable. So yeah, that's going to be my new gig. Is I'm gonna go to these. God, what were we talking about just before that? I had a reason for like bringing that up.
You're going to meetups and I don't know.
This is when the podcast starts to end. I remember this happened last time, because I didn't remember my trains of thought.
We're two and a half
hours in.
We're 2.5 hours in.
Yeah. So.
No, what were you talking about? We're talking about like self-realization. And then in the context of blockchains, I don't know.
Yeah, I forget what it was. I had a really good point to make at the end of this, but like.
Well, let me ramble right now, and maybe you'll come up with your point.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's.
Baka.
That was better than the first. That was way better than the first. No, this is old TFTC right here. Like, this is what we like. I fucking love this right now. Justin's in town for 5 hours.
I got a plane in 3 hours to Copenhagen. I'm like, oh fuck, Marty, you gonna like stroller me over here? I don't know.
I will get you to that airport no matter what. Don't worry. If you pass out, I will put you.
We were together at JFK at a layover from
Riga.
Riga last year.
Me, you, Jameson.
That was like one of the biggest shit
Macarona.
shows I've ever seen. Getting through that, I was somehow I lied and I was able to skip through the line.
That's the last time I've gone around the world. I can't travel. That's the other thing. Like, I like to stay static here in New York. Like, I just want to.
Yeah, you got a good spot. I'm in like the opposite point of view where it's like Austin is cheaper. So it's like you can you have the leeway to go and travel more. So this is something I'd like to do more is like, it's fun when I can get into the same like physical location as somebody for a couple days and like go and work with them. So if I continue doing this like education, like one thing, if I continue doing this education stuff, I'd love to like go and travel a little bit and like go and meet some of the people that work on Bitcoin and try to like pull some of the knowledge out. Because that's one of the problems in Bitcoin is like you have these people like, you know, Jonas Snelly or Matt Corallo who have like just immense amounts of knowledge, and one of the challenges is how to like basically drain them, right? You want to like drain it out of them and fill the rest of the community with it.
I recommend whiskey and beer. It helps. I'm telling you, dude, it helps. Believe it or not, if you can believe it after this conversation.
I mean, I believe it to some extent, but when it comes to like certain topics, I think it's a hindrance. Like if I try to go make a Windows build right now, I'm pretty sure of my Junction, my sweet Junction.
It could hurt.
Yeah.
So where does Junction end up? Like, what is your?
So this is what I want.
What is your ideal vision of Junction? Like, what can I do?
There's like two visions. It's like it's a question of where to put. Like one of the questions is like, where should your multi-sig wallet run? Should it run on your desktop computer or should it actually run on your nodal? Like in a world like when you have to plug in your hardware wallet into the USB port, it probably has to be running on the desktop because you have to have actual access to that USB port and a program
read
running
messages and send messages.
Yeah, like a program running on the desktop could do it to some extent, but you'd have to be using like Trezor.io, which is sketchy because they could be like they can sort of oversee what you're doing. You'd have to use one of their web services. And so it's like on one hand, if you're going to be using like the USB port, actually plugging it in, you probably want it running desktop. But I actually don't want to ever plug stuff into my computer. I would rather communicate with QR codes, honestly. The QR code is this is the way you'd set up a wallet. And Junction, you'd say, hey, I want to do a 305 wallet. And I say, okay. You choose the network, mainnet, you choose you want native SegWit, gotcha, okay. And so then you have to add these devices to participate. And so the first device, you'd say like, hey, I'm going to add a QR wallet, right? And so it would open up the camera on your laptop and you'd scan a public key from your hardware wallet. And you'd have like a screen on the hardware wallet, like BitBoy can kind of do this. BitBoy's a piece of shit, let's be honest.
BitBoy's beautiful.
But it's glorious too. And like Spectre, a product from Crypto Advance, I'm really excited about this product when it releases. It's really cool because it has the iPhone 4 screen.
He's from Switzerland, right?
No, he's Russian.
Russian.
Stefan Snigarev. He's one of the best.
I met him in San Francisco.
So I met him.
Switzerland?
I went to a Bitcoin hackathon. The first thing I ever did in Bitcoin, I went to a building on Bitcoin conference, and the hackathon was before the conference. And so I show up, and I'm like, I sort of told this on Stefan Lever's podcast. I walked around and was like talking to people, and was like, hey, what are you doing? And everyone's like super introverted, right? And they're like, look at their toes, and I'm gonna build a Chrome extension to like, do whatever. And then I get to Stepan, he's like this Russian dude, and he's like got this lap full of hardware, crazy blinky shit, He's like, I'm gonna build the first Lightning hardware wallet. And I'm like, I'm working with you. I am working with you. And we've been like great friends ever since. And so he's working on a hardware wallet that's QR based. And that's the way I would like to interact with it. And if you had a hardware wallet like that, and we're actually pretty close to this, right? So you could run a Junction, you could run a multi-sig wallet. If it was only cold cards, you could run it on your nodal. You'd basically just visit a website, and the website would be like, hey, upload a file from your SD card. Either upload your public key to register the wallet, or upload a transaction to register a new signature.
To sign all those.
Yeah, to sign. And so that's a real air gap, and you could run that on your nodal, and it could just serve as a website, because you don't actually have to have access to any physical ports on your computer, like a USB port. And so, so that's a pretty interesting point. Like, if Spectre launches their QR-based one, and Cold Card already has it.
Let's get into the QR-based.
Trezor T is going to have an SD card reader. Like, you could do a 3 of 5 with 3 air-gapped devices, 2 of which use SD cards, 1 of which uses QR codes. And then, so those would be the 3 like active devices, and you could just generate the last 2, one with dice and one with a seed picker or something, and just put them on CryptoSteel or something, and or just put them on paper. And those would be your final 2 signers. Those are your backups. And so like that would be kind of a cool way for Junction to work, is that it would just be something that runs on your nodal, your Casa HODL or Casa Node, or like MyNode. MyNode BTC is like a really cool project.
Relatively new, right?
Yeah, it's relatively new. I've looked at the code actually.
And it's a pretty sleek interface, right? You can it's plug and chug.
Yeah, he did a good job on it. And
it's sort of like the nodal interface.
The cool thing I like about it, what you want, right? The cool thing I like about it is it's freemium. So you can try it for free, and if you want basically to be able to connect remotely to your node, either via VPN or Tor, you pay. And that's a great model. You can try it, and then if you like it, you can pay for a little more premium access. And so I think that's it's a different business model. Like most of the business models so far, like buy this box, right? And in order to do buy this box, the firmware is kind of closed source. Oftentimes,
it's all going software in the future, right?
Yeah,
it's all going software in the future.
Yeah, so like
with any hardware you want.
I think this is one of the interesting things is like you can have it's like a freemium thing. You can try it on your own hardware. If you want them to ship you one, you pay the full price. If you have a Raspberry Pi, like I have so many hard drives and Raspberry Pis sitting around, it's embarrassing. So I actually set up 2 of these last week. And so I think like that's a question. It's like, where do you want your multi-sig, like the thing tracking your balances, where do you want that to live? Do you want it's a question. Like, this is what I was getting back to earlier. Like, what the fuck does it mean to run a full node? Does it mean that I have to have a separate index that I can query against, like an Electrum server? Like the real reason is that like Bitcoin Core can't look up an address. That would be called an address index. It can't do that. And so you have this like separate protocol called like Electrum. And it's like, well, is that what it means to run a full node? Do I have to run that? Or like, can I talk directly? Am I sketched out if Bitcoin Core, like if someone got access to my Bitcoin Core, they'd be able to see every UTXO ion? Well, like that's the whole point of Bitcoin Core, is that it can keep track of every UTXO ion. That's consensus. That's like, or that not necessarily consensus, but that's like governance. That's the mechanism through which people are participating in governance. They care about what they own. And so this is the big question for me. It's like, what, as an application developer, what does it mean to run a full node? What do I want the people, like, are they going to be running on a desktop? Or are they going to need to run it? Like one case is like you just do a one-click like Pierre Richard's node launcher. The other case is like you need this massive software stack running like 5 different nodes, and the user doesn't understand any of it. They're very different security models, kind of. And
It's all
like,
redundancy based. Like
it's confusing. Like I'm honestly like kind of a little confused about it, and so yeah, like I'm trying to figure out, do I need the Electrum server? Do I not?
Do you think the solution's more complex or more simple?
I personally am a minimalist, so like for minimalism reasons, I don't like Lightning. Like it just complicates my life. For minimalism reasons, I don't like multisig. But for fear reasons, I like multisig. Like I want to be able to sleep at night. So it's like I want to cut off all the chaff I can, and yeah. So I think.
Do you think we get to a future where signal sig custodianship of these UTXOs will afford enough protection where we don't have to worry about multisig and shit like that?
I mean, I think a different version of the world will be that multisig looks on-chain the same as single sig. So Taproot gets us close to there, but like you end up having to have an interactive protocol when the number of signers does not equal the number of total keys, right? So if you say like 2 of 3 multisig,
That
right?
makes sense though, right?
Well,
You always need
it's
less
a big
signers than total
problem.
keys.
So interactive is a problem because it means like to do a, I forget exactly the constraints in Taproot, but I think it basically means like to do a signature, you need to be online basically, and so you can't like do that in a bank vault. And I'm now at the point where I forget, like I'm not speaking terribly accurately, but like this is an interactive protocol is tough when you want to execute it in a bank vault where you're offline. And so I think this is like part of the way there. Like I think in the future you'd get to a point where everything looks like single sig. The on-chain costs, the on-chain data produced, it all looks like single sig, but there's actually like more complex policies in the background. And maybe like the absolute degenerate case, meaning like if everything breaks down, you can have one person sign it, right? So it'd start off as like a 3 of 5, and then it'd go to like a 2 of 3, and then it'd go up 1 of 1. Like after time locks, right?
So that 101 would have to be like 1n of 1a to n?
Who knows what it would be?
Like that like last signature that you could sign.
Yeah, that would
one
be
specific within the multisig.
Or anybody. Like that would be, well, probably not anybody, but like it really depends if it's an individual. If it's an individual, it can be anybody. If it's an institution, it cannot be anybody. The point is like, I think in the future we'll have more of these cases where like by default it's like a sort of like a large multisig quorum, and like if that degrades, you can have backups that are less likely to fail, and that's the kind of the future I see. Where yeah, I mean it's like I think the goal in Bitcoin is to make it so you can't lose the stuff, and like that's like sort of. That's kind of one of the protocol goals is if you can compose like these scripts in a way that you can always have like backups. Like a smart wallet could always have like backups. So if you fail here, you can always recover there. And then in the applications, that's the protocol side. And the application side, you just want to make it really hard for one of those layers to fail. So it's like these two sort of have to go together. Like the protocol wants to make it so you can have backups. And the application has to make it so like you don't need backups.
They both have completely different goals.
Yeah, the completely different goals, but together they can be like, well, you get the best of both worlds if they sort of harmonize. So that's kind of like the way I see it going is like, hopefully you have this redundancy, but hopefully you have software that makes it so you never have to take advantage of that redundancy. Like it just works. And so that's when it's like be your own bank is a burden. Like the way I look at it is like, man, I would like it if it were easier. It's hard, and so I think hopefully the concert of these two, the combination of these two sort of like independent efforts can make it so that's easier. And that's a world where I can see Bitcoin being really mainstream, where like it's not as scary. Like that's a cypherpunk future. Like when we were talking about like whether we can or cannot attain the cypherpunk aspect of Bitcoin's aspirations, like where private key security is easy, like that's a cypherpunk future where we do have that sovereignty, and that's something I'm really excited. I hope we can achieve that.
So cypherpunk first, financial second over financial first, cypherpunk second.
I mean, I don't know.
I would go that way. I would go that way.
I think so. I guess maybe I'd be on the opposite side. Like, I think people only care. Like, number go up is like the only reason people care.
What's that? Well,
Like to get
number
people
go up.
involved.
Number go up is something we can't handle, right? Like, number go up is either it does or it doesn't, and whether it does or it doesn't is very consequential to some people's ability to believe whether or not Bitcoin will be successful or not in the future.
It's really tough because like people have sort of been trained to not care about Bitcoin's value propositions. It's like you've been trained to trust the state will take care of everything, or that your employer, even like absent that, your employer will take care of everything. Like the people who work at Google are like, it's like a daycare. It's unbelievable.
Oh, have you ever gone around their campus?
It's
Their
amazing.
campus.
It's like,
it's not a workplace; it's a campus.
yeah. So it's like extended childhood in a sense. It's like they are your parents, and so it's like I think a lot of people have been trained to have been systematically desensitized to Bitcoin's value propositions, which are like independence, self-sovereignty,
Critical thinking.
yeah, and so yeah, it's like it is a challenge to get people to respond to those things because I think there's been a systematic effort to make people not value those things, and yeah, I mean that's one of the that's one of the fun things about like I've worked mostly on the education side in terms of the technical side, like technical like helping people who already are interested in Bitcoin understand it better. And so if I continue on the education stuff, it would be cool to work more on like helping people who don't understand it. Like that would be exciting.
More exciting than what you've done to date? I don't know if that's possible, Justin.
I mean, like the biggest problem in Bitcoin, you want to onboard people. You want new people involved.
Well, can you put that burden on yourself? That's the other question. Is that burden on you, or should you subject yourself to
It's not a burden. It's
effects?
like how effective is any one strategy at it?
Exactly. How
effective can one strategy be?
Effective or ephemeral will it be?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is I have no idea. Like, but I do think that the people who are effective at this are the most, maybe not the most important, but probably the most important. Like, if you can make
the
this
most
pitch,
high leverage, who would be the most important people?
If you can make this pitch to people like, hey, this is valuable, this is something that you should engage in, I don't see what would be a more valuable role than that.
I don't know if I can disagree either.
So
well, that comes in the whole like, are we just pretentious assholes? Like, who believes Bitcoin's the end all be all?
We may be wrong. Like, imagine that.
We may be very wrong.
Imagine that 2 years from now.
We're most likely very, like if you're talking about like
we're in Jersey City licking our wounds.
The Devils are gonna win it this year, I swear. Sound Money. It had its moment. It had its moment, kids. We could have brought Sound Money into the world 5 years ago. The fucking Jersey Devils ruined it. Justin.
I mean, it's a problem. It's a potential.
Justin, I'm hammered right now.
I'm hammered too. We have, our table is a bunch of, and let me just narrate, this is a bunch of empty bottles.
It's a ton of empty bottles.
I got a flight in 2.5 hours, so I think I'm gonna have to Uber there, and
you're definitely gonna have to Uber there. We're gonna go upstairs. We're gonna get some pizza first.
Oh!
That was better than the first. This is where I want to end it. This is the last I'm going to say. I love you, freaks. This has been an incredible conversation. It's always like I didn't even have to do anything. Justin was like, "Yo, can I come hang out?" And it was like, "I'm going to hit record. Is that cool?" And here we are.
Hey, you ordered pizza. That's more than most people do.
Peace and love, freaks. I love all y'all.
Take it easy.
Give me it. Give me it.
Give me what?
Tiki!